What's happening? Benton here. 4:30 a.m. Pacific. What's today? Wednesday, September the 10th, 2025. Your timeline. Not quite sure what all we will be getting into. The royal we. Actually, me, myself, and the replay crew, and there is a live chat today. Let's see how that goes. Soul Read Analytics, one of the a person in the so-called truth community, left me some comments on my posts tab yesterday. There was some confusion, so I may want to address some of that. A little bit of drama, probably not. Interesting how these folks, again, back to the idea of sysagents or system agents, not calling anybody in particular out on that accord, but based on the amount of people that seemingly either listen to these live streams or maybe get word of the proceedings, it's interesting. Not that any of these streams are necessarily heavily viewed, but it has to be more than the 80 to maybe 150 views, and then occasionally, depending on what the algo does, maybe like up to 250, right? And then if anybody knows this Aphrodite Rose Starfire person, she used to make a lot of posts on her community tab. I'm just going to call it the community tab. I don't like posts; it's too hard to say. The community tab about taking screenshots of her YouTube video views going backwards. Well, of course, I went to the YouTube help and Googled it and all of this, and there's something called like fake views or invalid views. That's what they call it. So that's the mechanism used to roll back the views. And then my college football channel, Matt Be Great, it came under attack. The AI bots here in Alphabet, Google, YouTube's Help It, for whatever reason, demonetized his channel. But then because it is college football season and the community for that channel is so large, and because he is active on Twitter or X, they tweeted at YouTube, and the thread had like 1,000 replies. I'm not on X, of course. So he's safe for now, but imagine building a business and for 10 years making one's living, or however many years, and then one day it's just like, yeah, demonetized. And it happened to one of my favorite channels, Millennial Steam. In fact, Millennial Steam's latest video is so good, I want to play it. In fact, I was walking around yesterday here in Los Angeles, where I'm now broadcasting from the back seat of a 2012 Nissan Versa. Yes, indeed. Oh, and there was an incident in the park. Perhaps I will get into that. Some canine related shenanigans, and folks again not wanting to follow the rules, having their dogs off the leash. And again, why have rules at all if society's rules are not to be followed? And then the interplay between, the order and chaos. And most of us at times do flout the rules and laws in certain ways, I would say. Although some folks will say, well, not me, okay, fair enough. And it's not just a Los Angeles thing. I see this, all around the country. And again, as I begin this broadcast and not really knowing ahead of time what I or the royal we would be discussing, did I lose the point in the setup? Maybe the dark chocolate hasn't kicked in yet. Oh, shout out to yesterday's donators. That was awesome. Yeah, I had a good time on the live streams yesterday. And Why I'm so obsessed seemingly with beginning so early in the morning, I'm not quite sure. Probably could have taken a walk and maybe see if a morning constitutional bathroom break could occur, but cross that bridge when we come to it. Something about rules in society. Oh, yes, the reality that anybody who's thriving, and I don't mean paying their bills, that's not thriving. Paying one's bills is not thriving. But anybody, quote, getting ahead in the present American society, again, there's always exceptions to everything. We don't need the anecdotal. The royal we is not interested in the anecdotal evidence to the contrary, because always factored in is there's always exceptions to everything, even that statement, right? Meaning sometimes there's not exceptions within a specific context. Oh man, did he forget the point again? A comedy of errors to begin the broadcast. Thank you for your patience. We will get there, the audience and myself. It's going to happen. Oh, anybody getting ahead in the present economic climate is doing so via unethical, immoral, and or illegal means. There's no exceptions, even though there is. Right. So effectively across the board. Effectively, there we go, de facto. And that is the level of corruption. And it's debatable, has the corruption always been there? Well, certainly at some level in this vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions that, speaking at least for myself, that the royal we finds ourselves enmeshed enmeshed. Let's work on the pronunciation, sir. Enmeshed. And if I had ever had any notions of teaching English abroad, certainly, not that I have, but certainly this manner of speaking would preclude the being from entertaining such notions. Ha ha ha. Yeah, let's listen to this millennial steam. This is only 15 minutes, and I think we can speed it up. But this is one of the best videos he's ever done, and it's basically just audio anyway. And I feel like he really hit the nail on the head. Far beyond even his normal high standards, Mr. Steam. And remember, you can't be friends with Millennial Steam because he does not exist. Very important. Or one cannot, I should say. All right. And he uses Chat GPT to make a lot of his content. So the scripts for his videos. So that's probably the most interesting part of this, is what Chat GPT came up with. So the title of the video is $77 an hour minimum wage ? Reality check on living costs. And that's about $160,000 a year. So I would implore people, the listener, perhaps don't skip this one and go listen to other content and say, well, Benton said 15 minutes. And as we know, the chances of me playing this thing all the way through without pausing to give my own commentary is fairly low. So I'm going to 1.25x this, because Millennial Steam manages to keep up a decent pace on his videos. So we won't 1.5x him. All right, hang on. Here we go. Maybe.
All right, before we begin and your head explodes and you come to the conclusion that I've gone insane for saying the things I'm about to say, hear me out. It's 2 a.m. I can't sleep. I'm rolling around in bed, and I whisper over to ChatGPT, how is this fair to live in a world that's this unjust towards working class people? And it was fighting me tooth and nail. It didn't want to write this video. It didn't want to talk about this video. It was talking in circles about how it's the community responsibility and the leaders of this country to change things. I asked it how it would make a more just system. We went back and forth for at least half an hour. And I woke up this morning and I was looking at what it had said and the transcript of everything that we talked about. And this 77-hour minimum wage is Chat GPT calculating the cost of living with inflation. This isn't a number that I pulled out of my rear, because I've told you guys for years on here that the cost of living is closer to $100 an hour to $150 an hour. It's not $15 an hour like it is here in Arizona with the federal minimum wage. ChatGPT almost lost its Vulcan mind when I told it what the federal minimum wage was compared to what the cost of living is today. So I took everything. I had to crunch the data over and over and over. I had to tell it to change perspectives, change the way that it was thinking, recalculate, rework, deep think, and rework until we got to these talking points with this introduction. So without further ado, let's get into what it wrote as an introduction. $77 an hour sounds like a dream, right? Except in reality, that's how much you'd need just to afford a one-bedroom apartment in Arizona without crying into your instant ramen. How it knew that I was eating ramen while I was working on this baffles the mind. Well, I'll tell you this much, I should have just eaten 2 handfuls of dirt. I would have gotten just as much nutrition and taste.
Yep.
Meanwhile, corporate America is still handing out $15 an hour life lessons, like participation trophies. You're supposed to feel grateful. Welcome to capitalism, a system where surviving is considered a skill. This is really true. Out here in this place that we currently live, you are survivor, man. You are figuring out how you're going to make your resources last until you get to your next pay period. It's brutal survival. And I'm telling you guys this as a person who has nothing in his bank account right now. I had to pay the internet bill a few minutes ago, and I was like, how can they possibly charge that much money for internet? And the reality of that is, who else is going to provide you internet? There are strong monopolies on everything, ensuring that anything that you really need, whether it's internet, electricity, housing, or food, are set at a certain price point. And in order to participate, you need to make a certain amount of money. And there are many people who are finding themselves wanting to participate in a society that doesn't want them to participate. And some of you put this into the comment section. And I asked ChatGPT this very question. Does this system want to turn every worker in America into a homeless person? And its answer is chilling. Because based on the resources that average people can have access to, the answer to that question is 100% yes.
All right. Well, and I need to pause there. So access to resources is something that I've begun to think a lot about. And the idea of the American worker, as a group, certainly not organized. And if you ask the typical American, anything about unions, generally speaking, staunchly opposed. Now, I understand that there's going to be corruption and problems with any man-made, entity or group. But if you look at what a union actually is supposed to function as, and understand that, yes, it will be corrupt, is that something that rich folks, who, again, an actual rich person, who are the laziest people in society, lest we forget, there's nobody lazier than an actual rich person. Meanwhile, not a single human being in all of human history has ever, quote, hard worked themselves into wealth. It can't happen, meaning to hard work oneself into a state in which they can now kick back, do absolutely nothing, and maintain their lifestyle, right? After living a wealthy lifestyle, which I think is important. The idea of some of these entertainers and rappers, saying, well, if you can't afford to buy it twice, you can't afford to buy it once, which is true. So while still having access to, oh, look, so the mansion next door has come up for sale. And one is, Mark Zuckerberg. So it's like, yeah, I want my privacy. So actual rich people, unlike the so-called middle class, which are people who are not middle class, because that has never existed. There's never been a middle class. What it is, my father, we grew up, for our area, a lot of people probably thought we were wealthy. We weren't. But my father certainly would have been considered middle class to upper middle class. So probably middle class based on the U.S. as a whole. But then with coming from such an impoverished, economically depressed area at the time, well, and until this day, it would have been considered upper middle class, right? But the reality was, my father was temporarily experiencing relative affluence, which is an important distinction. So yes, the idea of Mark Zuckerberg, it's not the actual rich people. It's not enough to live in a mansion on a palatial estate, because the ones who actually have true wealth, they want to buy all the mansions surrounding their mansion. And people like Larry Ellison have done this apparently in Malibu. Some of the highest priced real estate in the world. Apparently, Zuckerberg's over there in Hawaii buying up everything that they will allow him to buy up. And I remember a point from yesterday's stream where I was trying to make the point that, these hedge funds, and Gen Z has, intelligently identified that if they want to, they seem to understand that if they want to have a actual place to live and food to eat in 20 years, they better get rich right now. Again, relative affluence, not actual wealth, but these hedge funds are buying up the farmland. So, this idea that Donald Trump is out here doing things, well, as the media perpetuates this notion of, the Arkansas farmers need a bailout. Well, these hedge funds can't wait for Donald Trump, and again, that's not my idea, that's other people's ideas, to not bail out the Arkansas farmers so that a hedge fund is able to purchase the farmland, right? Which actually is some of the most fertile farmland in the country, lest we forget the Delta, the Mississippi Delta. So back to unions, and the psychological control of the populace, Moloch's machine, the system itself having achieved. And here's the thing about psychological control and enslavement: the system knows that it has psychological control of the populace, and it knows that revolution is psychologically impossible. Meanwhile, what does Benton see? Well, the world premiere here in Los Angeles was, I believe, Tuesday night for one of my favorite filmmakers, Paul Thomas Anderson's. And for some reason, the title of this film will not stick in my mind. So it's one battle after another. There we go. It's based on a Thomas Pynchon novel, rather, and I'm unable to properly pronounce Pynchon. That's why I say it that way. Pension. That sounds like a pension, right? Certain words old Benton here is unable to pronounce properly. Pynchon, I believe, which is there's the list of great American novelists is not a long one, but he is apparently on it. What was that movie? Incoherent Vice? No, wait a minute. With Joaquin Phoenix. Inherent Vice, I believe, was based on a Pynchon novel, if I'm correct. Also, a Paul Thomas Anderson movie, Mr. Anderson. And look at the timing of this. The movie, which is already Spielberg has already commented on and saying, I think it's going to win all these awards. They delayed the release for an entire month for the awards season. And looking at the war and looking at what's going on in the news cycle, and the movie is about revolutionaries. So clearly some version of a psyop. How could it not be? And they shot it on 35 millimeter. I'm a sucker for actual film, stock. So here I am, being in Los Angeles. I was trying to see, well, where can I go see this thing projected onto, actual film projection. But based on the excessive costs involved in seeing a movie projected on blown up to 70 millimeter and shown in IMAX on an actual film projection, I think we're going to catch a matinee for less than half the price, and we'll just deal with the digital. If I even go and see it, who knows it? I think it's released the 25th or the 26th of this month, and I rarely attend a movie in person. It's generally reserved for Tarantino films, but I do occasionally, depart from that to see a movie in a theater, right? Either way, certainly interested in that. So back to Kaczynskiism, the Unabomber, which again, if that was a real person, had one of the highest IQs on record, was a Cal Berkeley professor by, I don't know, like age 24, and then fucked off to a cabin in the woods. While again, this idea of, well, off the grid and removing oneself from society, that's not even possible. And in fact, on some levels, participated in society far beyond what any of us ever will. From his cabin in Montana. And again, yes, I understand PSYOP and false flag and all of these things. This is the so-called truth community, so there's really no reason to remind me of that. Oh goodness, let's not go politics just yet. But I did see a reference in the chat, and it's your broadcaster's fault for even looking down there. And please, commenter, and I've never seen your name down there, but tread lightly, sir. Strong identification with one of the two failed political parties, both of which only serve banks and rich folks and corporations. So can we please agree that all politicians work for banks and corporations in service of rich folks? And in fact, in all of the history of their parties, Republicans and Democrats have never done a single thing that benefited the masses in this country. Yes, at times, in their service of banks, corporations, and rich folks, and rich defined as anybody who does not have to go to a place and do a thing every day in order to maintain their lifestyles. That's the definition. Everybody who can't meet that standard is poor, just so we're clear. So if we can agree to all of that, but otherwise, if this is a sock account, you're going to need to log out of that sock account pretty shortly and pretty quickly and log into a different sock. But yes, J.D. Vance, the double Leo. And as we see authoritarianism and tyranny and the police state, which has already been present, and as playing foil to Republicans, the Democrats will certainly say, oh, look, the police state. Well, it's been a police state my entire life. Born in 1975. I was born into a police state in 1975, certainly. But with the escalation of the police state, J.D. Vance seems uniquely positioned as the sun in Leo with Leo rising, because lest we forget, other than Biden, every U.S. president going back to, including Trump, going back to Clinton. So starting with Clinton, every U.S. president has had sun in Leo or Leo rising. And now we have the rise of J.D. Vance, the double Leo. The only exception, again, Biden does not have sun in Leo or Leo rising. So just in case people are unclear and they say, why are you talking astrology? Well, it's more or less proven that Nancy Reagan was big into astrology. And in fact, much of what supposedly her husband was doing as president was involved timing with astrology, consulting with astrologers. And apologies for the turn into left field, and it's my fault for looking into the chat. I'm going to glance down there again to see, do I need to time out the commenter or not? It's a 24-hour timeout. We're not necessarily just going to ban people. Although StreamYard makes it very easy to ban people, I have to actually grab one of my other cell phones and in order to accomplish the 24-hour timeout. And this is why I don't want to pay StreamYard $45, because it's ass, but it has some advantages. What's up, Joe Moore? Good to see you. What does this say? I can't hardly read it. Oh, well, now I'm being told what to do. So yeah, we'll see you tomorrow. You're free to listen, but not interested in being told what to do. And really, that's the only way to prove oneself to not be an authoritarian. And if you listen to these streams, Jay Vance, for any period of time, you'll understand that recently old Benton here has quite astutely sussed out that the American individual is in fact an authoritarian. And in fact, it's simply not possible to have an authoritarian central government without an authoritarian populace. So, the median level of performance within the vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, certainly the median level of performance in this country individually, that does represent an authoritarian. So let's go ahead and get you out of here till tomorrow. We'll see you then. Or we'll see you with one of your stock accounts, as it may be. Certainly no control over that. But one moment, please. Or Joe Moore, feel free to if you're interested in. What's up, Rick? Good to see you. Yeah. Where's the timeout? There it is. Put user in timeout, 24 hours. See you tomorrow. But yeah, not interested in problem solving, not interested in cutesy people being cutesy in the live chat. Right now, if I know you, you get a wide berth. But let's not forget, Mr. Vance, if you were here yesterday, the first stream we did no live chat. The second stream we did a live chat because I believed it was going to be non-tent. And then King Stephen, the Sanity Machine, was kind enough to pop in after I dropped the link, and we had what many folks consider to be a very I don't even know how to term it, but an interesting conversation to be sure. So that's where the royal we is and all on all of that. So back to whatever I was on about with the economic factors around unions and the fact that the American worker simply refuses to seize even one iota of power. Meanwhile, what does the system promote for its own purposes? Well, power to the people, of course, strength in numbers. Meanwhile, that must be reconciled with Kaczynskiism, the writings attributed to Theodore J. Kaczynski, who, again, if that was a real person, had one of the highest IQs on record, was very studious and did a lot of research. And in fact, a lot of his writings were taken from other writings because he, much like myself, apparently enjoyed reading and research. But I'm, of course, not afflicted or blessed / cursed with the high IQ and the high horsepower between the ears, rather, see, as evidenced by that statement. Boy, that dark chocolate, shout out to theobromine. It's kicking in now. Boy, howdy. I'm on one, as they say, but not stimulants, of course. And so he intelligently makes the case that all revolutions or uprisings that originate from within the system will only ever serve to further perpetuate and reinforce the system itself, as I see now loops into problem solving in YouTube comments of many normie channels where people are just assuming there's going to be an uprising. It's like, well, maybe, but if there is, it's only because the system has seen fit to allow the psychologically controlled masses to revolt, but the revolution will serve the system. Very important. Now, meanwhile, back to Paul Thomas Anderson, Mr. Anderson, and the timing of this release of this movie that I would not even consider seeing, except for the filmmaker. And I do like DiCaprio. I've been a DiCaprio fan for quite some time. But yeah, surprise, surprise, right? And walking down Sunset Boulevard, I noticed, there's movie posters, pasted to this wall, and it was Leonardo DiCaprio, with a rifle, a scoped rifle, right? And revolutionaries, and then, do I need to go? Perhaps we'll go read Angela Davis's Wikipedia page and George Jackson's Wikipedia page, and these the events that supposedly happened in the late 60s into the early 70s. That bears repeating because, as we know, the general public has no memory. But yeah, this is not lost on your broadcaster. And this is why I deserve all those donations. I earned those donations. I earned the amount of money that came in yesterday. So I won't hit y'all with the e-begging. I haven't really done anything yet today to merit it. And I'm certainly willing to sing for my supper should that prove necessary. Right. So let's go. And fear not, live chat. The new name and then the mentioning of J.D. Vance and addressing politics certainly got my attention. So, but mods, I will say to the mods who may only be symbolic mods, and let's make Rebecca Joe a mod. Is she still here? Because at some point I may make it to where, hey, what's up, Jimbo? What's up, Jimbo? You're going to be a moderator. You get a you get a wrench, you get a wrench, you get a wrench. Everybody's getting a car here. But because at some point it may be a chat of only moderators, just so that the randos can't come in here and comment on my streams. And here's the thing: is if the moderator doesn't want to be a moderator, just don't ever moderate anybody. Because I've been on channels where I was made an honorary moderator, and I was just like, hey man, that's cool, but you understand, I'm never going to moderate anybody on here. So but if you want to in the future, especially a new name that you're unfamiliar with, feel free to time them out for 24 hours and then kindly let them know that they're welcome to come back tomorrow and try again. And then please, no personal beefs. Anything that involves a personal beef on another channel, please don't moderate folks here for their behavior on other channels. That's really all I ask. Other than that, do your best / worst. But anyway, back to Millennial Steam. Do we even remember that that's what we were listening to? I don't know. Does it even matter? Because as we know, this is all for entertainment purposes only, and none of this will amount to a hill of beans. So let me navigate to Millennial Steam. Take it away.
100% yes. All right, let's get into talking point number 1. They tell you budget wisely like it's a life hack. But reality, rent, grocery bills, they swallow everything before you even blink. You're not broke because you mismanage money. You're broke because the system is designed to keep you gasping for air while someone else profits off your labor.
Well, and my apologies. It's going to be a lot of pausing. So let me go ahead and drop the link to this video, because this is fantastic. Actually, it's going to be on my it'll be on my community tab if anybody wants to go find it. Fire stream. Let's go. Let's just put some. We got three fire emojis. We'll get it done. And what is it that keeps people from discussing the economics and the fact that they're fine as everybody who's not wealthy, as everybody who's not an actual rich person is increasingly squeezed in this country? Why is it not discussed? Why are there not support groups? Why aren't people, this idea of revolution or organizing? It's because of what? There's one word that prevents people, and it's part of the psychological control of this place. Shame. Shame. It's shame, because it's shameful to live in poverty in this country. It's shameful to live in poverty in this country, right? And it's reality for most of the population, most Americans, because if you look at what's considered the poverty level, which is laughably just ridiculous, right? But I'm talking about living in poverty. It's more than half the country at this point. Period. That's what it is. It's way more than half living in actual poverty. And so, yes, there was a time, I remember the 90s. I remember learning how to not frivolously waste my money. I remember training myself to have a written budget and adhere to it. After the pain of, selling my, what at the time was considered a pretty decent home theater setup in the mid 90s. Of course, I purchased it on credit cards because the system, for some insane reason, since I was attending a university, I had just turned 18 as a college freshman. Well, here's the consumer credit, sir. Have at it. So I was like, oh yeah, Best Buy 20 whatever %. Well, I'm not going to pay this shit back anyway. And I knew it. I might have made a couple of payments. Oh, Montgomery Ward's going to give me a G. Thank you. And nowadays, does anybody even know what that is? Montgomery Ward. In fact, well, it doesn't even matter. Let's not get in the weeds of what I purchased at Montgomery Ward. But yeah, between whatever little Visa and MasterCard they would give me and whatever Best Buy, I think Best Buy gave me a couple of grand. We had a nice Sony 25-inch Sony Trinitron. We had a Laserdisc player. We had a nice Sony VCR. We had a nice stereo receiver, a nice set of speakers. Oh, we was balling. And then the pain of selling that to one of my college friends who had just gotten their tax return. I was like, hey, bro, I got to pay this rent. Would you like to pay cash for this entire home theater setup with this awesome, really nice rolling cabinet? Dude, this thing was boss. I wish I had a picture of this thing. It was fucking cool. He's like, yeah, man, I'll give you $600 for it. Why not? And here's what I love about America and consumer credit and uh, borrowing money. And if we tie it into morality, and as already mentioned on the stream, nobody getting ahead in the present society is doing so. Everybody getting ahead at present is doing so through unethical, immoral, and or illegal means. Guess what? I never paid the money back, and after 7 years, it disappeared like it never happened. Yeah, I just did not use credit for the next 7 years. Yeah, there you go. Like it never fucking happened. Almost like what happened in Iceland during 0809 when the government of Iceland said, hey, Icelanders, we're going to need y'all to bail out the banks in this country. And they said, well, that's interesting because we don't owe that money. How about y'all deal with the 50 billion that y'all say we owe? And guess what? Poof, it magically disappeared, the 50 billion. And in fact, the entire government of Iceland resigned because apparently they fear the people over there. Because why? Because you have an educated populace, presumably, who, at least at the time, were thinking for themselves. Meanwhile, shout out to Iceland, one of my favorite countries, because they took our boy Bobby, they took in our boy B. Fisher, the only American world chess champion ever, who beat the Russians, and probably the greatest American competitor of all time. So if you want to talk about Michael Jordan as the GOAT, well, only because we don't consider chess to be a sport. But if you add up everything, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Wayne Gretzky, add them all together, and it still doesn't equal the accomplishments of one Bobby Fischer, right? And we know what he had to say about certain groups of people, and what he said about 9/11, right? But let's not get into that. Okay, back to Millennial Steam. We'll listen to another 10 seconds, and then I'll have to respond, I'm sure. So my apologies. If you want to hear the entire 15 minutes, cruise on over to the community tab. The link is there.
Another very pointed question that I asked ChatGPT is, how is this fair? Because when you think about $14.75, which is the minimum wage here in Arizona, which went up by 50 cents last January, how is that not a prank on people who don't have the aptitude to find higher level skilled work? And it was
aptitude, or people who simply will not treat themselves disrespectfully, will not humiliate themselves for an amount of money that will not allow them to earn a living. Because I was happy to go to these bullshit bozo jobs as long as I could have an apartment, put gas in my car, buy food, and maybe take my girlfriend or wife out to the movies on the weekend or whatever we were trying to do. Go to the movies, or I'm sorry, dinner, whatever we was trying to do, and maybe have a hobby or two, right? Benton was into computers back in the day. So when 0809 rolled around, and when it became clear that I was going to make just enough money to have an apartment, put gas in the car, and eat food, it was like, okay, well, there's no extra money. What's the point of even having a job? And that was Benton choosing to transition into a vagabond, homeless lifestyle right around the age of 35. So this is called to be a chump. This is called being a chump and a sucker, to continue to slave away merely to attempt to maintain one's lifestyle. And again, back to the point I attempted to make earlier with respect to unions. And imagine living in a country, well, you don't have to imagine it, it's the country you live in, that intentionally allows banks and corporations in conjunction with the political system and the government, on behalf of rich folks who work directly for the chief commander itself, right? Antithesis / Satan. Okay. That's who's running the show here. And that's who decides the conditions on the ground. And people want to say God is in control. Well, God is love, and love doesn't know what control is. So I don't know what you mean by that. Huh? Right? Oh, love conquers all. Love doesn't know anything about war. Love only knows peace. Again, what are you talking about? Because remember, this is the realm of duality. Love is singular. Love is not a duality. Right? Now, in this realm, it manifests in a very different way. This world knows nothing of love. and kindness and compassion. So America as a society doesn't know how to take care of its citizens. It doesn't know how to operate out of the context of what? Never-ending corporate profits, never-ending record corporate profits. That's what America's about. America is operated at the level of a never-ending series of corporate profits. Meanwhile, what is the common American now instructed to do? Oh, you better invest. You better invest. Oh, okay. Well, we've seen where that's led us. In fact, my own father squandered his fortune, which wasn't even a fortune, but it was enough money to, at some point, eventually retire on and maintain his lifestyle. But he wouldn't be a rich person. That's at that point, it's merely one who is retired, right, later in life. Not a rich person. See, not a rich person, but in this idea of just your common American, trading in the markets. Meanwhile, as I talked about yesterday, Enron. Actually, no, I didn't talk about it yesterday, but Enron was the test case. It was the prototype via these accounting tricks, and the accounting tricks are now so just in your face and above board, seemingly, that I've found normie economic channels that just more or less say, oh yeah, they're discussing the financials of such and such corporation, and they're describing the accounting trickerations that cause the company to have a certain profit level. They're like, well, actually, they don't have this level of earnings that they're reporting, but it's because of these accounting tricks they're able to actually, continue to show record profits on paper. And that was if you can only remember one thing about Enron, it's to be able to make record profits quarter after quarter after quarter for at least 9 consecutive years. And in the last 2 years, the company was fiscally insolvent. And here's how Enron was able to show record profits year after year after year, quarter after quarter. They did so by convincing the government to allow them to utilize something called mark-to-market accounting. Meanwhile, a so-called financial genius known as Jeffrey Skilling from Harvard Business School, he created the market for trading energy. Now, what does a market for trading energy eventually lead to? It leads to rolling blackouts in California because energy traders who only work on commission, well, they have a base salary, I'm sure, but in order to make their $2 million a year trading energy, what they did was they called up the power plants and they said, hey, if y'all don't mind, could you loop the power around, just send it out of Cali into Oregon or maybe Texas or wherever, and then just loop it into Oregon, because California had supposedly deregulated their energy. They had deregulated these industries, and deregulation means regulation. I don't know if folks are aware of this. Deregulation in this inverted world, that means regulation. So the state of California codified a set of regulations, and the regulation said, well, if the power is sent out of the state, right, then that enables certain things to happen, and it allows the price to float on the open market somehow. And I'd have to go back and look at my notes and brush up on these things. So much like the people waiting in line for gasoline in the 70s, right, the oil crisis of the 70s, well, we now know that was caused because the companies that controlled the actual fucking barges that have to go pick up the oil at the time in the Middle East and bring it here, they figured out, based on the mathematics of John Nash, probably game theory, they figured out how to only have the ship in position to pick up the barrels of oil when the price was at the highest point possible. That's why Americans went through the oil crisis or the oil embargo and all of this. And then you get into, that's a form of rich people utilizing corporations to suck out and vacuum out the wealth of the country. And it's been happening for the entirety of my 50 years in this country. That's what it is to be a working American. So please understand, when you go to work today, if you go to work today, that's what you're supporting, is a system that is doing some version of trying to put a vacuum hose into your pockets and vacuum out whatever is in there to be sucked upon in a predatory fashion, and it's only ever gotten worse. So back to Enron. Enron was the test case via mark-to-market accounting and other mechanisms, including Jeffrey Skilling from Harvard Business School being some genius, and then he hired another genius called Andrew Fastow from Wall Street, from finance, and he said, okay, well, the government's now going to allow us to, much like the subprime mortgage crisis that would happen later, the government's going to allow us to create these really fancy financial instruments. And we can trade those, we can sell those, we can package those. So when Enron needs to, when it's time to report their earnings, Enron says, holy shit, we've got to make record profits here to keep the stock price up. Hey, Andy, what do you got for us? Andy says, I know, I'll make an off-books entity, and me and my wife and my buddies, we will be the people who we'll use the rules and regulations. We'll create these investment entities, and we will purchase some of what Enron owns, this paper, right, that's not showing a profit. Well, we'll just move it off the books. We'll purchase it. And Andy sold this because remember, there's a board somewhere that's got to be sign off on this, right? A board of directors, and we'll convince them to sign off on this because we'll say, well, Andy can pay more money for the assets, because remember, these are assets, right? On an accounting ledger, these are not a problem, these are assets. So, well, Andy, because he works for Enron, he has a greater understanding of the assets, so he can pay more for them than we can just sell them on the open market. Like, this shit really happened, folks. I've listened to a 90-hour audiobook about Enron at least 3 times all the way through. I've got 270 hours just into one audiobook on Enron, okay, while driving a truck earning 50 or 55 cents a mile, lest we forget, in service of corporations. This is all very important. Very important, folks. Very important. So now when you look at the stock market, and how long has it been since there's been a stock market crash? And I remember 87, right? That was the last, fairly serious one as far as I'm aware. Actual, but there was the flash crash. I've forgotten what year the fat finger flash crash, right? Because remember, one guy somewhere had a fat finger. Does anybody remember the fat finger flash crash? Or does the listener, and my apologies if this sounds insulting, does the listener not have a memory? Google fat finger flash crash. Let's Google it right now together. Fat finger flash crash. Give me just a moment. You're going to love this one. And this is what you are expected to go off and bootstrap and hard work yourself for the benefit of this system of things, right? While being denied access to resources. And this is why the American worker is not respectable, because they put up with this nonsense. Fat finger flash crash. The 2010 flash crash was a rapid, severe stock market decline on May the 6th of 2010, where the Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped by nearly 1,000 points in minutes before rebounding. The event was triggered by a large sell order of E-mini S&P 500 futures contracts, which was exacerbated by high-frequency trading algorithms. That's what, if you ever hear me say black boxes, that's what a high-frequency trading algorithm is. That created a domino effect of selling and price drops. The crash highlighted vulnerabilities in the market, leading to increased scrutiny of high-frequency trading and the implementation of new trading rules and circuit breakers to prevent similar events. So probably some version of a PSYOP or, whatever, a false flag. But then I've actually forgotten, maybe the fat finger crash, maybe that's actually a separate crash. Let's see, fat finger crash. Fat finger. Fat finger stock market crash, or just fat finger crash. A fat finger crash is a financial event triggered by a fat finger error, a simple accidental input mistake by a trader such as mistyping an order amount or price. This error causes a rapid and drastic drop in security prices, leading to a flash crash in the market. Okay, two separate events. My apologies. A notable example is a 2022 incident at Citigroup, where a fat finger error led to a massive sell-off of European stocks, resulting in significant losses for the bank and substantial fines from regulatory bodies. But remember, when an institution is fined, they've typically received free money from the government in the form of bailouts and other incentives. So if I give you $50 and then later on I'm like, hey man, you done fucked up, I'm going to fine you $10, is that a punishment? Because I've given you $50. It's like your parents giving you a week off from school, but then at some point they're like, hey, I'm going to need you to go stand in that corner for an hour. Okay, sure. Let's do that. Right. Does that make any sense to anyone? So tell me again that I'm somehow at the level of not being blasted with fear, guilt, and shame, that I'm supposed to go out here and be productive for this system of things. Tell me again. So what I'm here to tell you is that Enron was the prototype test case for an entire stock market that will not crash. It will continually hit new highs because now all corporations are Enron. So mark-to-market accounting says, hey, if I'm Enron and I can strike a deal with the government of India, and this really happened, and say, hey, India, if you guys will sign this agreement, we're going to build a power plant over there, and y'all need a power plant. And so if you sign this 10-year agreement, we will guarantee you a fixed cost for energy. And this is a benefit to India because they don't have to see the cost for energy go up and down and down and up unpredictably. So that's the carrot for India. And then Enron says, yes, we will build this power plant in multiple phases, right? And so they begin construction of the power plant. Perhaps they complete phase one. Meanwhile, Enron, when the contract is signed, they get to claim 10 years of profits on the books right motherfucking now. And this is also a mechanism whereby Enron made record profits. Meanwhile, why would they even bother to build the power plant at this point? And see, what we see is that, oh, well, the culture of India is that, well, the government has guaranteed payment. So when Enron realized, hey, why isn't India making their payments on this power plant? We're slated to begin construction of phase two to unleash more kilowatt hours, right? More megawatts, more mega gigawatts, right? So Enron claimed 10 years of profits and never actually completed construction of the power plant. And that's what gets bailed. That's what gets bailed out. That's when I talk about free money for nothing for banks and corporations. Meanwhile, nobody's angry that happened. But when your neighbor has four children and is on Section 8 and gets $1,000 a month in food stamps, that makes the being angry. Meanwhile, the entirety of food stamps and Section 8 is $130 billion per year in this country. Right. This free money for nothing to banks and financial institutions and corporations is in the trillions. Right. Just the interest on the national debt, 1.15 trillion. Right. So what are we talking about? And this shows you the psychological enslavement of the populace, some based on their own ignorance. So you'll never get me to get angry because whoever lives next door. Meanwhile, I'm living in a car, but that's kind of a side topic. You'll never get me to be angry that a human being is eating food and food is going in their children's bellies. Oh, but they didn't earn it. Yeah, did Enron earn the 10 years of profits that they claimed on their books day one through mark-to-market accounting? Did they hard work themselves into those profits? Meanwhile, they didn't even bother to finish construction of the power plant, and the government of India didn't even bother to pay for the power that it received. It's a fucking joke. And if the populace was more like me and had now here he goes martyring himself. Let me calm down. If Americans had any ability individually, and this is what I mean by internal bootstrapping mind, body, and spirit, the median level of performance of the individual in society is simply below standard. The median level of performance individually in this country that individual that's represented cannot participate in a proper society. Because when a person's performance says, hey, I'm angry, how dare, I'm off at work all day, hi ho, it's off to work I go. I'm angry because I see them hanging out, lounging around next door, right? And I'm angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry. Meanwhile, no problem with what goes on with Enron, banker bailouts, Jamie Dimon. I'll read an article about what Jamie Dimon has been up to at J.P. Morgan with respect to Epstein and all of these hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Meanwhile, it reminds me of when I was having some issues. I was having some personal problems, and I quit my job at a convenience store, right? Old Benton here spent many, many years serving the public, lest we forget. If I get accused of being lazy, and that was both before and after a multi-year career, so-called, in IT, where I never earned more than $33,000 a year. Oh, there's your CC and your 33. Interesting how that works out. But yeah, it's the only time I've ever worked on salary. And because I was too dumb to know to negotiate up to 50, I got paid 33,000 because I wasn't too. Now looking back on it, it's like, well, yeah, they would have paid. I could have asked for 50, and they would have gave me, I don't know, 42 maybe. Like, for real, they wouldn't have even thought about it. They would have said, I would have said, hey man, how about 50? They would have said 40, and then we would have settled in around 50. I'm sorry, 42, probably 42, 43. Meanwhile, what is Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? What's the meaning of life? And the answer is 42, apparently. Also, Jackie Robinson's integration of baseball number. Anyway, shout out to Theo Bromine, not Theo Vaughn. And this is why I deserve to do this for a living. This is why Benton deserves to go live between 2 to 6 hours every day and make enough money to sleep in a motherfucking car or a motel room in Arkansas and pay his small amount of bills and put food in his belly. Yes, this level of performance is it earns it. But see, who's my employer? It's not going to be YouTube. YouTube has already said, well, we won't employ you to do this. And even if we do, we will cut off your employment at any time, like Matt Be Great, my source for college football news, who saw his channel demonetized and only got it back through his large community, who wouldn't stop tweeting at tweeting at YouTube, right, or Xing it, whatever it's called. Anyway, will we ever get back to millennial steam? I don't know, right? And I understand, like, there's not enough hours in the day for people to slave away to make rich people richer every new moment into perpetuity, which is the function of the economy. There's not enough hours in the day, folks, to do all of these things and also have even 10% of the knowledge of what Benton is elucidating here, right? And please do your own research. Don't take my word for everything I'm talking about here. Do your own research. But I'm here to tell you, the stock market at this point can't crash because it's all a bunch of Enrons. Meanwhile, yeah, if anytime the powers that be on behalf of Antithesis and Satan need to crash it, oh, well, look, fat finger, or, just some manufactured event. And imagine accepting a financial system where somebody can supposedly just, oopsie, I accidentally crashed the fucking stock market for 5 seconds, right? Oopsie doopsie. All right, back to millennial steam.
Video that I was working on a couple of days ago, entitled "Get Skills," and I never turned it into a script because it seems so phony. And every time I mention toxic positivity to ChatGPT, it says yes. It says yes to toxic positivity because that's the only way that you can keep the proletariat working for such time.
Well, and then see, I can't even do this because now I see before old Just Vance got timed out, or is this a different one? Who knows? Did he come back? Good. What does he say? And he said, are North Koreans authoritarians too? Question mark. Don't know, don't care. Don't live in North Korea. Can't even confirm that's a country. See? So as we see, people will not ever make their own arguments, right? But then when Benton makes an intelligent argument, well reasoned with logic, reason, and it makes sense, instead of refuting the idea with their own ideas, they just say, "Oh well," or does that mean North Koreans are authoritarians? Don't know, don't care. never going to go there, don't even know if it's real. Who cares? I'm talking about America, folks. And this is the level of performance of the bozo Americans. And again, to be an American is to be an American worker is to be a person who's simply not worthy of respect. At a certain point, with the level of shit that I eat when I drive a truck, when I do long haul truck driving, I realize at a certain point, truck drivers are treated horribly, and everybody hates truck drivers because truck driving is not a respectable profession, in spite of people's romantic notions around their grandpappy driving a truck.
Tiny little wages. How they're supposed to show up at work and smile while they're making $14.75. You look on Indeed for jobs, entry-level jobs requiring 3 to 5 years of experience. Let's say working at a help desk, flipping burgers, cleaning the floors at a restaurant, whatever you're doing, it's always not enough money to live. So when you think about a $77 minimum wage, we're not asking to be rich. We're asking to be paid a living wage, which rich people seem to not understand what a living wage means. It doesn't mean
they can't understand what a living wage is because they're rich. And a rich person has to get richer every new moment because they don't know who they are. Their entire identity is based on never wealth that always increases. See, they will go into an existential crisis, shame spiral, and freak the fuck out and panic if they don't get even more wealthier every single instant of their life. And that's not hyperbole, folks. They can't relate to what's going on for regular people. They simply don't understand. They don't have a frame of reference, and they never will.
Survival. It doesn't mean scraping by from paycheck to paycheck. And every time your rent's due or another bill's due.
Meanwhile, when I drive a truck, I do more work in 1 week than a rich person does in a decade. That's not an exaggeration. In 10 years, I do more work driving a truck in 1 week than a rich person does in a decade.
Scanning the room around you to see, well, what can I get if I sell this? Or what can I do if I sell that? During my retail years after college, I ended up liquidating probably 80% of everything that I owned just to keep myself inside of a room that I was renting from a slumlord in a condo a couple streets down from where I live now. I had to. There was no way that with the hours that I was getting that I could sustain myself. And more people are finding their life situation impossible. Like I've talked about in the past. Within walking distance of my current house, I can go to a payday loan place, I can go to the drive-through liquor store, and I can go to the pawn shop. No problem. Every one of those places is more than willing to take advantage of you, to take advantage of the people that are already being taken advantage 100% by a system that doesn't believe that they should be alive. Talking point number 2. Pick a job you love, they say. Sure, I'll pick one that pays $15 an hour while a 1-bedroom apartment costs 100% of my monthly income. Your so-called freedom is just choosing which kind of suffering you want, because survival in this economy is a horror story disguised as adulthood. I said this in my video yesterday, is that we're all not allowed to be adults. Act your wage. What does act your wage mean when you're paying people $16 an hour? Come to work, pretend that you're working, and we're going to offer you $16 an hour. Not enough to move out of your parents' house, not enough to drive your own car, not enough to go on vacation, not enough to feed yourself. What is that? What does that even mean? When the whole system around you, this economy, the jobs, life itself, everything is about keeping you as poor as humanly possible, but giving you just enough resources so that you keep coming back to a job. Do a job you love? Really? Walk up to any Walmart worker and ask them about that. Yesterday, while I was driving home from work, I even asked ChatGPT. When people say, if you hate your job, quit it. And even ChatGPT was like, yeah, that's a great idea for people who have money, people who don't actually have jobs, or people who don't care. If you're rich.
Well, and see, that's why Benton, once he got to a certain level of experience in truck driving, at a certain point, I had enough money in cash to say, I'm not doing this job, because I knew I could quit the job and enjoy my life to some extent and then go back and drive a truck. See, And so we can see clearly that the system is based on keeping the worker on the hamster wheel. And again, back to this old black man I met in a truck stop in Memphis, and he was a local. And he said, yeah, back in the 80s, the early 80s, he said, I could do one coast to coast run as an owner operator and I could take the rest of the month off. That doesn't benefit the system. That doesn't benefit rich folks. The last thing they want is the worker figuring out how to game the system through a legal means to where if they're willing to bust their ass for a week, that was a Jim Rome reference for anybody who doesn't know, if they're willing to bust their ass for a week, then they get to have a 3-week vacation and they can do that 12 times a year. Rich folks ain't into that. So that's why it's effectively not possible. See, or why can't I just work 6 months out of the year as a truck driver under decent working conditions and then fuck off to Mexico for 6 months? I mean, other than the fact that Mexico's mad at the US, I'm talking about Mexico of a few years ago. Why the fuck not? See, because that doesn't make rich people richer every new moment into perpetuity, which is the function of the economy. And this government and these corporations are incapable of giving a flying fuck about my welfare and well-being. They are not, whatever machinery and wiring needs to be present, they don't have it and they can't ever install it. The corporation can't give a flying fuck about anything other than the powers that be, right? In a system, especially the government, that only speaks the languages of money and power. Guess what? The working class doesn't have any money and it damn sure doesn't have any power.
If you're living at home, if you don't need money, sure, don't like your job, quit. But the reality of that statement is that by doing so, you may end up on the street as a homeless person. Talking point number 3. Every cent you earn is a donation to the invisible machine that feeds billionaires. Healthcare, rent, groceries, they rise. Your wages don't. And you're supposed to smile while society...
Adjusted for inflation, real wages in this country have never increased in my lifetime. They've temporarily gone up. They've temporarily gone down. If you Google real wages adjusted for inflation and you get the chart, it's a motherfucking flat line from 75 till now. They'll claim that it's slightly up recently, but what's going to happen is you add another decade and it's going to go right back flat. So you go look at it for yourselves and tell me what the trend is. Yeah. Meanwhile, truck drivers made more money in real dollars. See, that's all jobs. If you look at what truck drivers were able to earn in the early 1980s, they were able to earn more money, forget about inflation, than a truck driver is able to earn now doing just regular old truck driving. Part of that was there was way more union jobs.
And this is normal. Welcome to the slow motion horror show called Being Poor in America. The worst part is that most people, you're talking about the 90...
And being poor in America is everybody who's not rich. Yeah, I understand there's this idea of a middle class. There's no middle class. That's people temporarily experiencing relative affluence.
10% of people don't like their jobs. They don't like going to work. They don't like being mistreated. They don't like being given child wages and rewarded with Happy Meal toys at the end of the week. No one really likes the way that things are. And when I asked ChatGPT last night to rehash every part of society, it came to the conclusion that there is no way of changing it from the bottom. Absolutely none.
It's Kaczynski.
And I was just like, I was sitting there, I was laying there in bed, looking out my window, thinking of AI, and I told it to use its AI brain in order to do these deep thinking questions that I was asking it. And if it can't find any solution for this, we're all trapped in this meat grinder together. There's no way out. There's no chance that they will ever raise the wages to $77 an hour, where living wages begin. And I know many of you probably still aren't here, but what are you supposed to do when the cost of living has gotten this out of control?
And I want to point out this boomer notion of Gen Z doesn't want to work. Boomers worked 40 hours a week, folks. 40 hours a week. I remember. I was there. I watched it happen. 40 hours a week. Now, did some people want to work overtime? Did some people work all of the overtime available? Remember Benton here, when he went to truck driving school, I got a job at the airport in Austin driving rental cars from the drop off area over to get detailed and then back to whatever parking spot they go in so that it can be rented. And I worked 21 days in a row until the management figured out, oh, he's just showing up every day and clocking in and working. And they finally said, hey, man, you can't do that because they told us that we're not going to continue to pay you overtime. I just showed up and worked because nobody told me I couldn't.
They're not done putting the screws to your private parts. Things are going to get worse and worse and worse until people stop participating in this system. Because from my perspective, that's my unique perspective, unless we stop, this will continue to get worse because they don't have any shame. They don't feel any pity. All they see is a proletariat that's there to make certain that they can get on their yachts and they can spend most of the year traveling while you work for them and continue generating money for their privileged lifestyles while you get older and older and realize, oh my God, I'm going to get to retirement age and I don't have a thin dime. Or you look in your savings account like I had to this morning and realize it's going to be a tough week, a tough 2 weeks to get to your next paycheck because your paycheck isn't this Friday, it's next Friday. And you already have nothing in the tank. And why is that? Because the cost of living has far outpaced what you can generate working 2 or even 3 jobs. And financial security, job security, they don't exist. So we all live in a state of alert and panic. And on top of that, most of us are suffering from severe depression. In fact, this weekend, when I was driving, I could feel the depression coming in like from the side of my brain, like a fog moving in from the left, trying to force its way into the middle. And as I called them, these intrusive thoughts had everything to do with the lack of financial stability in a country that's hell-bent on turning everyone that works into a homeless person.
Well, meanwhile, what does the media say and what's perpetrated about America? Oh, richest country on earth, richest country in the history of the world. And you know what the richest country was before it was the US? It was Japan. And why was it the richest country? Because whatever country has the highest GDP, gross domestic product, that's considered the wealthiest nation. And how is the wealthiest nation considered the wealthiest nation? It's called an asset bubble. So Japan was going through an asset bubble. So by the end of the GDP going so high and having such a greater GDP than other countries, that means the price of assets becomes a bubble, meaning it just goes up and up and up and up. It happened in Japan. Then look at the economics of Japan after the asset bubble. America is now been undergoing the same thing. And that's why houses cost so much. That's why cars now cost so much. That's why pretty much not everything, electronics managed to remain inexpensive. Certain categories are still cheap and affordable. However, when you look at real hard assets, that's why they go up and up and up, even beyond saying, well, yeah, of course, inflation, the prices go up anyway. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a asset bubble, right? That's why these houses cost so much money. That's why these cars cost so much money. It's because it's an asset bubble, and it's because America is touted and promoted as the richest country on earth. Meanwhile, all you need to do is Google countries ranked by GDP per capita, and you'll see that even countries like Ireland have a higher GDP per person or per worker than the US. US, I think, is 7th.
Let's get into our closing monologue. So yeah, $77 an hour isn't a fantasy. It's the cruel math of survival. And your $15 an hour job isn't a stepping stone. It's a donation to someone else's yacht fund. Laugh, cry, rage, whatever keeps you awake long enough to pay rent. At the end of the day, the real horror isn't that we're underpaid. It's that we've been trained to accept it. And if you're scrolling this right now, remember, surviving isn't failing. It's the quiet rebellion they'll never notice. So this is strange because it's used the word horror in 3 separate talking points already. First, third, and closing. I had to tell it to continue.
The horror. Colonel Kurtz, anybody from Apocalypse Now? The horror.
Really make this darker. But in its artificial intelligent brain, darker just means adding the word whore, which, I mean, every day that you wake up in America as a poor person is a new nightmare. You're not going to escape it. As I mentioned yesterday, poverty has a gravitational pull, and there's no way that you are going to be able to swim away, run away. In fact, yesterday when I was talking to ChatGPT about quitting your job, it said, yeah, you can tell a person that's trapped in the ocean, just swim to shore. But it doesn't take into consideration everything from where you are to getting to shore to safety. There could be a riptide, there could be sharks that go.
Well, and this idea of, well, just swim to shore, that's the conventional wisdom, so-called common sense word of mouthing of everything, which is somebody does recognize, hey man, I can't hardly pay my bills, and people just say, oh well, do this, that, and the third. So that's the same thing as, hey, I'm drowning out here in the ocean, and somebody's just like, yeah man, swim to shore. Oh, okay, thanks, I appreciate the help, buddy.
Landing area could be too rocky to land, but no, just keep swimming. And if you drown, well, that's because you didn't pull on your bootstraps hard enough. All that was an ex parte conversation. How did you find out about any of that? I'm interested too.
If you drown, you just didn't pull on your bootstraps hard enough. It's your fault. And that's the internalization versus the externalization. That's the spiritual attack of, hey man, it's your fault that you can't make things happen these days. And that's the shame. It's the shame of being in capitalism, where it's promoted as a meritocracy and the cream rises to the top, get more training, maybe work a little harder. Meanwhile, I thought it was work smarter, not harder, right? But do all of these things, and if you still can't access the resources that you need, well, that's shameful because you clearly are doing something wrong. And in America, we tie that to morality. Just like Dave Ramsey has 2 different YouTube channels. One of them, he consults with business owners. And when a business can't pay its debts, that's not viewed as a moral failure. But when somebody calls him on his Dave Ramsey show main channel and they are in all this credit card debt, it's somehow a moral imperative because, well, you agreed to pay the money, you better pay it back. As an individual human, now it's a moral issue. But when it's a corporate business, well, now it has nothing to do with morality. Now it's just, well, what can we do to maybe save a sinking ship? And if that includes, and Dave Ramsey himself said this guy had taken a $250,000 cash deposit because they were going to renovate this house, right? Or maybe it was a $250,000 job and he got $125,000, but he was running his business like a literal Ponzi scheme. And so Dave is going through the problem solving of, okay, how do you maybe not go out of business? And the first thing he said was, well, yeah, of course, those people, they're screwed. That's what Dave said. They're screwed. You're not going to be able to afford the materials to actually go do the work. And then they're probably going to end up suing you. But, basically just they're out of luck. And it's not a moral imperative. Dave is not like, hey, man, you got to sell all this equipment. You got to do everything. You got to beg your vendor that you buy materials from. You got to do whatever you got to do because you took these people's $125K in, good faith, right? And you got to get down there and you got to work on their house. But if it's an individual human being, it would be a version of that. Hey, man, y'all got to go get a job. And if it's somebody that already has a job, he's like, hey, man, it's rice and beans and y'all are going to be driving Uber in the evenings and you're going to have a job on the weekends because you got to pay this money back. Same guy speaking in 2 different contexts who claims to be a Christian, right? Again, this is why I deserve to make enough money doing content, because you're not going to go to another channel that puts this all together in the way that I do. Yes, there's going to be some channels that are way better on the financial stuff. And whenever they loop into spirituality, they're not going to know what the fuck they're talking about. And you might find a spirituality channel that talks about bits and pieces of what I'm talking about. And they're going to be motherfucking clueless with the real world, day in, day out economic factors and how the system is structured. I provide unique content that you simply cannot access anywhere else. And I understand and have accepted and released myself from the part of life and I will not guilt, fear, and shame the audience any more so than I already have, perhaps in the past. I won't go into this negative feedback loop to harass and beggy monster people into supporting my lifestyle as if I was some, version of Aaron Imholt. And if y'all don't know, that's the fellow in the thumbnail. That's Aaron Imholt from the Steel Toe Morning Show. Fascinating creature. That one, certainly. That's how he earns his living, right? Meanwhile, I've certainly panhandled while sleeping on a sidewalk or, sleeping in the woods. And I've also gotten a job and I've slept on a sidewalk and took a train to an entirely different town and worked in a call center for a month. And I did not receive it was 30 days before I received my first full paycheck. How is that legal? Meanwhile, corporations and banks have access to whatever funds they need instantaneously, right? Oh, but remember, they can have a fat finger and temporarily crash the motherfucking stock market also. Are you crazy? Are you crazy? Yeah, you are crazy. Not you, the listener, but individuals in this country are out of their fucking minds for continuing to slave away for these banks, corporations, and rich folks under these conditions. That's why the American worker is not respectable, because no respectable worker would continue to show up for work every day only to be given the bare minimum resources as if they were an actual version of the horse from Animal Farm. And then, yeah, he's pulling that plow no matter what. And then what happens when he's finally can't pull the plow? Well, it's off to the glue factory. Of course. So that's what homelessness is on some level. Off to the fucking glue factory with you, which is in some ways actually a better fate, I would argue. Right? That's in some ways a better fate, I would argue. What up, OTW? We already covered the revolution, whoever this is. We already covered the revolution. So you might want to actually listen to the content and pay attention, whoever this is. So, whoever that is, I love those. I love those emojis. And see, imagine, the fact that these are my fellow Americans, and this is what they do for entertainment. My channel is entertainment. For them, right? For them, right? Anyway, we'll see you tomorrow. What's up, Ghostface? Good to see you. Shout out to OTW. And here's the reality, and I'm just going to say it like it is. I don't really need anybody here's commentary on economics because none of you know anything about it. I'm trying not to be a dick, but compared to me, there is nobody who has any fucking clue about economics in the so-called truth community. You can't find a single person, even if they claim, well, I've worked in this, I've worked in that. Oh, really? Well, that means, well, actually, Bex probably knows more about this stuff than I do, but that was her training at an actual, high level university. But meanwhile, she almost never talked about economics. Isn't that interesting? But Bex has a high level training in finance, apparently, if anybody knows who that is. But here's the thing is I've got people who don't, who if I just said, hey, man, fat finger flash crash, go, right? Without being able to Google it, they don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. If I say, hey, man, black boxes in the context of financial trading, go, they don't know what that is. But they're going to come into my channel and comment. See what I'm saying? Like it's so below my level that why bother? Well, they're entertaining themselves. And yes, show me a human, I'll show you a hypocrite. It is somewhat paradoxical because Benton himself has said what? What has Benton said? Benton has said, well, this is all for entertainment and none of it is going to amount to a hill of beans. Well, I'm sort of doing my thing also. I'm getting whatever I need to get out of this, the royal we, and energetically, it certainly assist the cranky old man. Let's get the cranky old man out so that maybe the dog walkers of Los Angeles don't have to encounter the cranky old man in the morning. Their morning, right? What's up, Mark Basket? And also look at these comments. They're actually, this is defenders of the indefensible system because they're utilizing what? And this is a key point for the audience, right? Anybody who actually wants to internal bootstrap and bring themselves up, mind, body, and spirit within themselves, teach yourself how to immediately identify mockery and ridicule wielded as a weapon of psychological control. If you look at every post made by what I assume is the same person, one under the name Jay Vance and the other under Trump session, right? Like recession, Trump session. It's all involving mockery and ridicule. See? So the moment I see mockery and ridicule, I understand a lot about the person because I'm playing a game of poker, which is a game of incomplete information. So the moment I see somebody utilizing a specific betting pattern that represents mockery and ridicule, I immediately know what I'm dealing with, right? And I will get their money in the context of the poker game. Meanwhile, the big money gets the little money. I represent the big money with my superior knowledge and understanding of the economic situation. See? They don't understand it. And I'm a layperson. I trained myself to understand economics, right? Do I need to launch into an off the top of my dome explanation of what happened during 0809? I'm capable of that. Now, if I really wanted to do it justice, I would need to fuck off and brush up on my research. Right? It's been a while, but I can certainly hit the broad points. But let's go into Jamie Dimon and what in his involvement with Epstein. So let's go Jamie Dimon. And it used to be on his Wikipedia page. It's no longer on his Wikipedia page. But let's go ahead and get Jamie Dimon and what he said about the Troubled Asset Reallocation Program, or TARP, and his explanation for what would be viewed as shameful, potentially, right? If you need to be bailed out, that's shameful in your world. You feel bad if somebody bails you out, meaning, oh, I'm going to be in a position to accept charity. That's shameful. Well, when Jamie Dimon manages his bank, not his bank, but the bank that employs him, into literal fiscal insolvency, meaning that without a government bailout, they're going to cease operations, right? Well, not only is he not ashamed, him accepting billions of dollars represents he sacrificed for the greater good. So not only is he not ashamed of it, it's a point of pride to take your tax money. Meanwhile, nobody's angry about a billionaire, a literal billionaire who's only ever worked for people. Nobody's angry that his bank got billions in TARP funds. They're angry at the so-called welfare queen or king that lives next door and gets $1,200 a month in food stamps in his own Section 8 housing. Meanwhile, that's a drop in the bucket compared to the amount of money these banks and corporations get from the taxpayer. Drop in the bucket. Anyway, let's go. Hang on. Jamie Dimon, TARP funds quote. See this. It's interesting. My Google Pixel is able to decode my ridiculous accent, but for some reason this Motorola can't. But either way, I'm going to type it in. Old school. Jamie Dimon, TARP bailout quotes. On accepting TARP. So this is what the AI overview on Google says. Jamie Dimon has expressed complex and sometimes contradictory views on the Troubled Asset Relief Program. My apologies, I've been calling it reallocation. Relief Program, TARP bailouts balancing a sense of national responsibility with regret over the stigma it created for banks, not for him personally, and not for his bank, because he'll happily tell you the following. We took the TARP money, and we meaning JP Morgan Chase, we took the TARP money for the good of the country. In 2010, Diamond stated he was grateful the government had propped up the struggling banks during the 2008-2009 financial crisis. He emphasized that JP Morgan Chase accepted the $25 billion in funds for the good of the country, not because it was failing. See, he took $25 billion for you. Now, if the welfare queen and king next door understood to lie to just tell you to your face, hey, I'm doing this for your good, because I could be over here, instead of getting this government money, we could be over there stealing your shit, Padna. We could be over here burning down our house for insurance money, and it might catch your house on fire. We could be across town carjacking fools and, driving a stolen vehicle through the front door, through the front of a jewelry store, right? Like, for real. So we're taking 1,200 in food stamps and we're living on Section 8 housing, and we're doing it for your benefit. If they knew to think like Jamie Dimon, well, then what would be the problem? Meanwhile, $25 billion is almost as much as Section 8 costs the government. The government, to subsidize human beings' housing in this country, is $30 billion. Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan took $25 billion for TARP and says, well, no, we did it for your benefit. We didn't need it. Now, why did he do this? He says, well, we didn't want the little banks to feel bad about needing, the shame of needing to be bailed out. And we wanted to set a tone as an industry leader, see? And so your neighbor could say, well, we want to set an example for these other welfare recipients. We want to set the tone for these welfare recipients to don't be ashamed to go on the dole. Hey, neighbors, don't be ashamed to go on the dole, right? We want to set an example for them. So we don't need the money. We're taking it because the system says we're entitled to it, and we want to set an example for the people who actually need it. Imagine your neighbor telling you that. What would your reaction be? But somehow it's okay when Jamie Dimon says it. And this is why the American worker is a piece of garbage. And this is why Alex Jones, I'm turning into some version of Alex Jones just by being foolish enough to look at this material, right? And now I'm needing to access my own spiritual achievements within myself to not get too angry about this. Right? It's become a scarlet letter. Well, thankfully, that effect is worn off. Despite taking the money for patriotic reasons, Diamond commented that the assistance had become a scarlet letter for the banking industry. Well, that shit's worn the fuck off. The negative public perception of the bailouts led many to believe all banks were on the brink of collapse, and they were. They were on the brink of collapse because of something called off-balance sheet liabilities. So was the official books of JP Morgan in good shape? Absolutely. But they know that they have two sets of books. And that was what led to the credit crunch or the credit freeze, is because if I'm JP Morgan and I know I have on-balance sheet assets and liabilities, I also have off-balance sheet assets and liabilities. And I have to assume so does Bank of America, so does Citigroup. So now, how can I do deals with Bank of America? How can I do deals with Citigroup? I need to be guaranteed that I'm going to be paid, because remember, bankers pay themselves first no matter what. They pay themselves first no matter what. Has anybody not read Rich Dad, Poor Dad? That's the crux of that book, is pay yourself first. A banker always pays themselves first. So that's what led to the so-called credit freeze or credit crunch, because the banks wouldn't do business with each other. Right? So he's actually lying to you here, and he knows he's lying to you, and he's depending upon your ability or inability to figure it the fuck out. And the individual in America can't figure it out, but somehow some bozo from Arkansas who sounds like a ridiculous person because of his accent, somehow Benton figured it out. How did that occur? Right. So when Diamond says, well, some of these banks didn't need the bailouts, yeah, it's because they have on balance sheet and off balance sheet. Well, if I know I'm running two sets of books, I have to again, this is John Nash, game theory, optimal mathematics. I have to make decisions based on assuming that my airsats competitors, remember, at the highest levels, competition is a sin, but I have to assume that my airsats competitors also have two sets of books. And this is back to the Enron example of, hey, we'll just hire Andy Fastow and he'll wave his magic financial wand and we'll just move whatever liabilities that happen to be known as assets. Amazing how that works. A lot of things that common Americans assume are considered liabilities, like, oh, let's buy some debt. Well, that sounds like a liability. No, it's not. Somebody has contractually agreed to pay that money back. That's an asset, sir. So we saw Henry Paulson when he sacrificed. What was Henry Paulson of Goldman Sachs? What was his great sacrifice? Well, in order to serve as Secretary of the Treasury, Henry Paulson had to liquidate his J.P. Morgan stock that was worth like about 350 million. So he had to receive a payout of 350 million to go to work for the government. And on day one of him at the press conference, when he took the mantle as Secretary of the Treasury, an already in on it reporter said, okay, Mr. Paulson, what discount are you going to give to the American taxpayer for bailing out the banking system through TARP? And he said, these so-called toxic assets. And he said, what are you talking about? Those are AAA rated securities, sir. And the American taxpayer paid 100 cents on the dollar for something that the Wall Street couldn't sell at any price because it couldn't be valued, because it had been packaged. The fucking home loans had been packaged into mortgage-backed securities through tranches, through collateralized debt obligations, or CDOs, where they took one tranche was loans that are almost guaranteed to be paid back. They took a middle tranche where it's like, yeah, some of them are going to fail, some of them are going to be okay. They could go either way. And then the bottom tranche, which was mostly steaming piles of garbage that were most likely never going to have a financial value. And a few, the homeowner was somehow, some way going to be able to make the payments. And they packaged that all together because the school teachers retirement fund in Kansas, by law, can only invest in AAA rated securities. So then after they created the mortgage-backed security, the CDO, they went to the ratings agencies who fraudulently gave it a AAA rating. And then fast forward a few years, Henry Paulson, after doing the great sacrifice of receiving $350 million and liquidating his Goldman Sachs stock, and in finance, that's considered that has to be a sacrifice, because if he held on to it, it's probably going to be $1 billion at some point, especially when you consider the concept of America as asset bubble. He sacrificed. And they say, hey, man, what discount are you going to give to the American people under TARP? He said, what are you talking about? Those are AAA rated securities, sir. And the American public has absolutely no notion of what in the fuck I'm talking about right now. They don't know any of this. They might know what TARP was. They might know bits and pieces. They don't know the entirety of this picture. Certainly the working class doesn't know what the fuck I'm talking about. So tell me again how I'm somehow morally obligated to go out today and toil and slave away for corporations to make rich people richer. Explain that to me again, please. I'll wait. Surely that fellow with the sock account is back by now. Waiting on you, partner. And every single person listening to the sound of my voice will happily pay fees to financial institutions. Most of you, now in the so-called truth community, not everybody has consumer credit, but a lot of you do. You'll happily pay interest to these entities I'm speaking on, but most of you will never give Benton a thin dime. And Benton's actually giving you something. The banks are only taking from you, right? because they're letting you borrow money that they get for damn near free. And why is the banks and why is the markets and why is Trump supposedly putting pressure on the Fed, right? Why is the administration? Because what the banks want is money. They want interest rates as close to zero as possible. Not for you. They want the overnight rate to be as close to zero as possible so that JP Morgan, Citigroup, and Bank of America can get free money for nothing from the government and the Federal Reserve, and they can immediately loan that money out to corporations in a short-term window and receive 3.25% probably on average in interest for nothing. So imagine getting $1 million or $1 billion effectively for free, and then immediately being able to loan it out, and then 30 days later to get back the billion with 3% interest. That's called free money for nothing. For doing nothing. And somehow that's defensible. But your neighbor on Section 8 and food stamps, oh, the horror. The horror. The horror. What up, Mark? I see that he greeted me down there. And yeah, this makes me angry. What I am is supposed to be angry by this. If there's supposed to be some righteous indignation around the financial system and how it operates. See, people are supposed to be angry when the government does things that are bad to the people. That's supposed to make people angry. See, so I'm actually behaving like a normal human being is supposed to behave. But because of the SSRIs, the anti-anxieties, and the Aldous Huxley Brave New World version of keeping the masses pacified and psychologically enslaved, right? Because of those mechanisms, well, nobody can really be bothered to be upset about it. Meanwhile, your average person just assumes, well, Benton, why are you talking about old shit? That's old. Yeah, and none of it got fixed, folks. And in fact, it went unnoticed, but they bailed the motherfucker out again, and I think it was 2022 or 2023. And as I predicted on the heels of 2008, 2009, I said, they're going to do this again, right? You think the bailouts are a one-off, they're going to do it again. And I got to put the earbuds on. Give me just a second. I'm going to switch phones, and I'll drop off briefly, but we're just going to switch phones, and the sound of the traffic is picking up, so one moment. I got to chill the fuck out anyway. One moment, please. And then I called Amazon yesterday. Oh, yeah, I got a whole Amazon story for you. And so as a common person, when I have an issue that needs to be addressed as a commoner, what the corporation does is they put a kick me sign on my back and tell me, hey man, everything's good. And then they put a kick me sign on my back, and then I get a kick in the ass. And that's what happened. Yeah, I gotta switch. I'm gonna drop off, and I'll be back shortly. All right, we're back. And looking at the mockery and ridicule down there with respect to this financial news by one particular user in the chat. See, that shit's not funny, man. It's not funny. So what he's doing down there is the system is putting the kick me sign on his back, and then somebody's putting their foot up his ass and he thinks it's funny, and he's mocking it and ridiculing it. See, but it's happening to him. See, he's acting like he's the one that put the kick me sign, and he's acting like he's the one that put the foot up the backside. No, sir, you're the one who's getting kicked in the ass and mocking and ridiculing your own plight, right? And this is a gallows humor, Stockholm syndrome. See, it's to identify with the very thing that enslaves the being, right? And it has to have validity because it's happening. So the fact that I came out of my mother's womb, which is another word for matrix, and into this matrix, because was delivered here through my mama's legs, and I'm here, and this is all seemingly happening, but of course, with elements of waking dream, surrealistic unreality, deja vu all over again style. It has to be right and proper, and it has to be on behalf of proper authority because it was already happening when I got here. And this is also one of the key features of Moloch's machine via this vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. Because this is the world that one was born into, it has to have authority and validity solely based on the fact that it seems to be happening. Right. And why this is not well understood, is baffling to what I am. And it shows the lack of critical thinking of the populace, right? The populace can't fucking figure it out. Okay. Now, why can Benton figure it out? Because he's taught himself how to utilize logic, reason, and critical thinking and deductive reason. See, Sherlock Holmes, in conjunction with very strong intuition. That sense that something just ain't quite right. Anybody ever had that notion? Something's just kind of off here, right? That's called intuition. That's spidey sense. That's the gut. I hate its guts. It's a celebration, bitches. It's dark. It's more dark chocolate because old Benton ain't quite jacked up enough, apparently. Actually, it's too early for dark chocolate. My apologies. I'm gonna have to. Wait. And I see one of our regulars in the chat learning to fly. Well, to be born into this system is to be taught how to sink, right? And we sure hope you can learn how to swim. Maybe that's why Americans are now so obese, to help them float, right? Maybe that's why Americans are large and get larger. Not in LA, of course. But thank you, sir. Good to see you. And Mark Basket gets a wrench. Because pretty soon, if there's an option to only let the moderators talk, then I don't know if there is. Maybe I'm way off here. That's certainly possible. Am I not live anymore? YouTube doesn't seem to think I'm. This is weird. If you go to my channel, it doesn't even show me as live right now. If y'all notice that, if you go to my live tab, it says I'm not live. That's fucking bizarre, but whatever. If you go to my live tab, it says I'm not live. And again, if you don't want to be a moderator, just don't moderate anybody. And please, no personal beefs from other channels. I only want people moderated based on what they do here. And any unfamiliar names that look like they're using mockery and ridicule, just go ahead and time them out for 24 hours, and we'll let them try tomorrow. No, thank you, Mr. Basket. And we're doing a thing because if I'm able to just have only moderators comment, I'm really to the point where I don't want just the peanut gallery to be able to even type down there. Oh yeah, Ghostface Chris gets a wrench. Wait a minute. I don't know what Learning to Fly said. Oh, okay, somebody already handled it. Yeah, the censor got his comment. Yeah, this Soul Read Analytics fella, whose name is, SRA, Satanic Ritual Abuse. I do need to be careful. I'm looking at the screen too much in the dark, and it fucks up my vision. But I get bleary eyed. Apparently, he had left a couple of comments on my community tab, now known as the posts tab. And I was on my stream yesterday. I talked about that he had typed some shitty comments, but I meant the live chat because I don't go to my post tab that often. So then he thought that I meant what he posted on my post tab. It's like, no, man, it's what he posted in is my live chat. So he's so drunk and out of it, he doesn't even know what the fuck's going on. So this is what it is to be Benton in the so-called truth communities, to have people who are too drunk and out of it to even track what's happening. But then what does he do? Mockery, ridicule, spiritual attack, and raise all bets, because he can't ever be wrong. In his world, it's not possible to be wrong. And this is another thing about individuals in America. It's effectively impossible from their perspective to ever be in the wrong. And I simply have no interest whatsoever in interacting with individuals who, no matter what happens, they will never be in the wrong from their perspective. That's part of being just a bad person. What's a bad person? Bad person. Anyway, do I need to read more about Jamie Dimon? Let's see. Now I'm on a different phone. I got to type it all in again. We never finished learning about Jamie Dimon. Quotes. Wait a minute. TARP bailout quotes. Quotes. And again, this used to be on his Wikipedia page, and it's not anymore. I know I've got screenshots of it somewhere, but that's another matter entirely. Now, see, it's given on a different phone. It's actually given me a different. Now I'm getting a different search result. Actually, I'm over it. I can't even read this right now. I can't see. It's just too disturbing. Oh yeah, I was going to read. The Epstein. This is a New York Times article. Where'd the phone go? We got too many phones in play. We got 3 phones going. Let's see. Here we go. Aha. All right. One moment. Thank you for your patience. One day in October 2011, Jeffrey Epstein walked into the cavernous lobby of 270 Park Avenue in Midtown Manhattan. The skyscraper was home to J.P. Morgan Chase, arguably the world's most prestigious bank. The sex offender, who barely a year earlier was under house arrest after serving 13 months in a Florida jail, was ushered onto an elevator and whisked to a top floor where Jamie Dimon, the bank's chief executive and one of the few human beings who's ever become a billionaire, and he's only ever worked for other people, by the way, I added that part, and the rest of senior leadership had their offices. And the man could become president. It's possible. Who knows? Probably not, though. Epstein had long been a treasured customer at J.P. Morgan. His accounts were brimming with more than $200 million. He generated millions of dollars in revenue for the bank, and that's all fees. When you see he generated millions of dollars in revenue for the bank, that's fees, landing him atop an internal list of major money makers. He helped JP Morgan orchestrate an important acquisition. He introduced executives to men who would become lucrative clients, like the Google co-founder Sergey Brin, and to global leaders like Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel. He helped executives troubleshoot crises and strategize about global opportunities. And this is that, the proverbial, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Because they didn't help. When it says he helped executives troubleshoot crises and strategize about global opportunities, well, no, somebody helped Epstein know what information to pass on. Epstein is not out there hard working himself into understanding the material. He's cited as some sort of mathematical genius in all of this. And that may be, maybe he was a good mathematician. I don't know. But, the idea that other people weren't doing the actual work and feeding him the info is fucking nonsense. Rich people don't do the work. They hire people to do the work. But a growing group of employees worried that JP Morgan's association with a man who had pleaded guilty to a sex crime. See, this is what, and I want to help you folks to understand that anytime you read a disturbing article, see, what's happened is everything I just read represents something that the reader may find disturbing, and it may be unsettling and disorienting within their inner space. So immediately the media and the article will say, yes, well, the system is also worried about these things. So there's no reason to panic because the human beings who operate within the system, well, they're also worried. Well, they're worried about other things. They're worried about displeasing their master, Satan / antithesis. That's what they're worried about. They're not worried about the plight of the American worker, certainly, or people who were foolish enough to let a pizza boy cold call them and talk them into refinancing their home, or even worse, like the Poe folks of New Orleans who'd had their homes in the same family for generations. And then a person who was a pizza boy one day got a job the next day selling mortgages and cold calling Poe folk homeowners. And at the same time, Alan Greenspan, considered the financial genius, was saying, went on television and said Americans would be foolish not to take advantage of historically low interest rates in the form of adjustable rate mortgages. And we all see how that worked out. That was called 0809 crisis, global financial crisis. Because surely it was all based on the idea that surely home prices could never possibly fall in lockstep all across the country at one time, which is exactly what happened. But a growing group of employees worried that JP Morgan's association with a man who had pleaded guilty to a sex crime and was under federal investigation for human trafficking could harm the bank's reputation. Just as troubling, anti-money laundering specialists within the bank noticed Epstein's pattern of withdrawing tens of thousands of dollars in cash virtually every month. These were red flags for illicit activity. Meanwhile, when you see this anti-money laundering, my research indicates, and please do your own research, my research indicates that earlier when I talked about the credit crunch or the credit freeze, that during that brief period of time when JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Citigroup, and others would not transact business because of how bad their books were, and that's the whole reason for the bailouts, was to give piles of cash called liquidity to the banks so that they knew they could pay each other for the financial transactions. What kept the system running during that brief period of time, a few days to perhaps a week, is that one of the dirty little secrets is that the drug money from the world drug market for illicit drugs like meth, heroin, all of these things, opium, it's allowed to freely flow in the form of cash into U.S. banks, and that was enough liquidity to keep the gears oiled just long enough for the money to get dispersed. And I don't mean the TARP money. I'm talking about the Fed money. Because in the week, I'm going from memory here, folks, do your own research. In the week before the Congress passed the TARP bailout, and remember that was $700 billion, and they only ever even dispersed about $350, about half of that money. Only about half that money even went into the banks, because the week prior, the Fed injected 900 something billion, almost $1 trillion. And you can Google that shit right now. In fact, let's do that. Let me Google if that's even available. In fact, it might take too much searching, but yeah, it's going to, I need a computer. I can't do all of this on a phone. My apologies. But do your own research. That was why Epstein was at the bank's headquarters. JP Morgan's top executive in charge of ensuring compliance with laws and regulations had already pushed to hire him as a client. Now, Stephen Cutler, a former federal securities regulator, meaning he worked for the government. And this is what I talk about with the Benito Mussolini helicopter hand corporate fascism. If I work for the government in regulatory, if I'm a bank regulator with the feds, well, I can be pretty sure that when I retire from my government position, that one of these corporations and banks will hire me. So now Stephen cut and quadruple my salary. So I'm already incentivized to play ball with the banks when I'm working with the government, for the government. Now, Stephen Cutler, a former federal securities regulator and the bank's general counsel, had added his voice to the chorus. Epstein's, now what does any of this matter if they go ahead and do business with Epstein? They either take his money or they don't. All of this gnashing of teeth and furrowing of the brow, what good is that? It's performative. Epstein's chief defender at the bank was Jess Staley, a top contender to one day succeed Diamond as chief executive, meaning this is the person who has to actually show up all day and put in 40 hours. Because now, see, the bank is going to make them actually do some work, perhaps, meaning they're going to have to physically be in the office probably. Because Diamond probably ain't even there. His office is there. He ain't there. Epstein's chief defender at the bank was Jess Staley, a top contender to one day succeed Diamond as chief executive. Staley persuaded Cutler to sit down with Epstein and hear him out. It was a high-stakes meeting for Epstein. His close ties to JP Morgan had been invaluable in his quest for money, influence, and legitimacy. The bank lent him money. Staley dished confidential information to him. At Epstein's behest, JP Morgan set up accounts into which he routinely transferred huge sums for young women who turned out to be victims of his sex trafficking operations. It wired his funds overseas. It even paid him millions. So remember this next time you're in line at an ATM machine somewhere, because all these big banks do versions of this on some level. But remember, they're worried. They're worried about it. Oh, okay. Epstein's crimes have been exhaustively documented, and elements of JP Morgan's relationship with Epstein have become public via legal proceedings in the United States and Britain. But the full story of how America's leading lender enabled the country's most notorious sexual predator has not been told. This account has been pieced together from thousands of pages of internal bank records, sealed deposition transcripts, and other court documents and financial data, as well as interviews with people with direct knowledge of the Epstein relationship. Among the findings, bank officials for more than a decade were anxious about Epstein's prolific wire transfers and cash withdrawals. JP Morgan ultimately processed more than $1 billion in such transactions for him and warned senior management about his suspicious activities. But on at least 4 occasions over 5 years, the bank's leaders overrode those objections and continued to serve Epstein. So were those actually objections, is what I would say. Right. Now, meanwhile, it's now the time of day where I'm inclined to go handle my personal business. So I appreciate everybody hanging out for 2 hours. But I'm going to need some sort of a token gesture. Just like on my post tab, the previous video prior to Millennial Steam, it talks about how Robert Rodriguez wanted to direct the movie Sin City. But he also, in order to woo Frank Miller, who had drawn he had created the graphic novel. So in his efforts to persuade a Frank Miller who continued to demur the advances of Hollywood, Rodriguez eventually whatever the union is for movie directors said, well, actually, we're not going to allow you to be a member of our union and simultaneously release a movie with 2 directors, because Frank Miller also wanted a director credit. So Rodriguez, a man of actual integrity, said, fuck it, I'll just leave the union, and then offered to work for free. And in fact, the only reason the movie got made is because Rodriguez spent his own money to shoot a sample scene to show to Frank Miller to try to convince him to allow the movie to be made in the first place. And so what happened was that Rodriguez was like, fuck it. Once they agreed to make the movie, he was going to work for free. Well, the industry, and so his lawyer says you can't work for free. You have to be paid something. So he was paid $1 as a token gesture. And apparently this has happened multiple times in Hollywood. The the accounting and the system and the banking and the accounting and the lawyers won't allow people to work for free. They say you got to at least get paid $1. So somebody's going to have to send me a token gesture. If that's a $2, if that's $10, if that's a 20, I don't give a fuck. And I'm not holding anybody hostage. I'm going to go do my business. And I don't mean go to the bathroom, although I actually probably could have gone number 2 by now. So I'm going to eat some dark chocolate and chill the fuck out while y'all think about it. And then maybe I'll make my egg drink. So whatever y'all want, it really doesn't matter to me. But as you can see, I built up quite the head of steam. And with even more theobromine entering the system, I mean, who knows what could happen at this point. It could get wild up in here, y'all. You never know. He might drop another link like yesterday. But not without that token gesture, because my lawyers are telling me that I can't continue without at least being paid a nominal token amount of money as just gesture of goodwill. So anyway, I'll leave it up to you folks. And oh, here we go. Thank you very much appreciated. So bear with me. I need to take a brief break, eat the chocolate, and take care of some pressing biological matters. But we won't be gone for long. So thank you for that. And if anybody else feels like it, consider this the infomercial portion. If anybody has some spare ducats, I sure could use it right about now. And part of what I bought with yesterday's donos, in fact, is this theobromine, which I think we can all see is quite beneficial. I bought $8 worth of dark chocolate was what I bought with part of the donos. And apologies for eating on mic. Let me go ahead and mute the mic. How rude. And sorry, and that in fact, the token gesture, that's almost the exact amount of money that today's dark chocolate costs, like for real. I've when I put this last piece in my mouth, this is because it's on sale, it's $1.60 worth of dark chocolate. So the donator basically paid for the dark chocolate. Thank you, sir. Much appreciated. We're back. Hell, $10, I'll drop a link. How about that? I'm for sale, I guess, in a context, right? It's funny. This is America. Everything's a business. Even me, apparently. Right. And I kid. You know, what I am certainly can't be turned into a business. Not entirely, anyway. Even here in this vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. Sour gummies. That sounds yummy. Talking about bioengineered ingredients. It's good stuff. Apologies for the mouth noises there, the dark chocolate. But one thing about dark chocolate, man, a lot of nutrition in dark chocolate. What's dark chocolate got going for it? Wait a minute. Oh, that's something else. But yeah, you know who you are. I don't typically name the donators because it's hard for me to keep track of who wants to be recognized versus who doesn't. I'd like to be able to play more audio, but yeah, let's get back to this article. I'm interested in this as well. I saved this for the stream. I haven't read it either. So where were we? Okay. But the full story of how America's leading lender enabled the century's most notorious sexual predator has not been told. This account has been pieced together from thousands of pages of internal bank records, sealed deposition transcripts, and other court documents and financial data, as well as interviews with people with direct knowledge of the Epstein relationship. Among the findings, bank officials for more than a decade were anxious about Epstein's prolific wire transfers and cash withdrawals. JP Morgan ultimately processed more than $1 billion in such transactions for him and warned senior management about his suspicious activities. But on at least 4 occasions over 5 years, the bank's leaders overrode those objections and continued to serve Epstein. Meanwhile, see, I don't think suspicious activities is the proper terminology because suspicious means without evidence. Certainly they had evidence. Joseph Evangelisti, a spokesman for JP Morgan, said in a statement that the bank's relationship with Epstein was a mistake, and in hindsight, we regret it, but we did not help him commit his heinous crimes. And you know, I listen to all this courtroom footage and interrogation footage and true crime content. This is not a mistake. They, of their own volition, knew what they were supporting and chose to support it. That's not a mistake. That's a choice, folks. Just like in some of these interrogations, when they're trying to get the person to confess, they might say, you know, everybody makes mistakes or some version of downplaying the seriousness of the offense. But then when the person is throwing themselves on the mercy of the court about to be sentenced, how often do they say, you know, I made a mistake? And the judge is like, no, that's not a mistake, partner. You chose to do that. He added, we would never have continued to do business with him if we believed he was engaged in an ongoing sex trafficking operation. Well, that's simply not true, folks. That's a lie. We would never have continued to do business with him if we believed he was engaged in an ongoing sex trafficking operation. That's a liar who lies for a living. That is a person who knows they're not telling the truth. That's a person who, and this is back to, remember when I said anybody getting ahead in the present climate is doing so through fraudulent, unethical, and/or illegal means, right? And I think I said immoral before, but really it's fraudulent. There's nobody who's getting ahead in the current climate who's not doing so via fraudulent, unethical, and/or illegal means, right? And they know that this is what they're doing, and they know that while they might pass me on the street and look at me with disdain as a homeless person, they know on some level what they're doing to live in that cul-de-sac or live in that $3 million home in Los Angeles, or whatever they're doing, or pay $5,000 a month in rent. They know that what they're doing is fraudulent. They know that what they're doing is unethical. They know that what they're doing is immoral, but I'm the piece of shit. And they know that what they're doing is illegal, right? But I'm the piece of shit in their world because because I haven't done whatever it takes to be rewarded by this evil, wicked, twisted system of things. So from their perspective, I need to go serve evil sufficient to be able to access enough resources to sustain my life. So I'm a piece of shit from their perspective. See, the bank has pinned blame for the scandal on Staley, the fall guy or gal as it may be. I bet that's a lady, a trusted confidant to Diamond. We now know that trust was misplaced. Now comes the gnashing of teeth and the wringing of the hands. Evangelisti said. Well, they're going to have to Google this Jess Staley person. Where are the phones? Where are the phones? Jess Staley. Got to see what this is all about. The fall gal. Maybe I'll write it, but I'm not going to write a book. But no, it's a dude. Jess Staley, American banker and former CEO of Barclays. Oh, see, it doesn't even say. Okay. James Edward Jess Staley, born December 27th, 1956, is an American banker and former group chief executive and the former group chief executive of Barclays. He spent 34 years at JP Morgan's investment bank, ultimately becoming CEO. What? When was that? In 2013, he moved to Blue Mountain Capital, and in December 2015, he became CEO of Barclays. In November 2021, Staley resigned amid a regulatory probe into whether he mischaracterized his relationship with the financier, human trafficker, and sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. See, this is what the system will try to say. Well, look, we cleaned house. We cleaned house. See, sure you did. According to the New York Times, Staley was Epstein's chief defender at JP Morgan, helping Epstein maintain accounts at JP Morgan, even amid internal concerns that Epstein was using the accounts. So, yeah, the bank was concerned, but we had this one bad actor who allowed it to happen. Meanwhile, that person was just so persuasive. See, he was just so persuasive. So, yeah, we had concerns, and this is how. See, this is how Enron operates. This is how these financial institutions operate. And in fact, a big part of the subprime mortgage crisis in the 0809 was that. Does anybody remember AIG, American Insurance Group? Because there's markets for everything in finance, including risk itself. So, in order to do a lot of these deals, and part of the off-balance sheet operations of these banks is they actually sell some of their risk. So if I'm AIG and I buy some of JP Morgan's risk, does that sound like a detriment or does that sound like a good thing? Is that an exaltation or a detriment? Well, AIG, it goes on their books as an asset. It's not a liability. It was a liability on JP Morgan's bank balance sheet. When AIG buys it, they've purchased an asset because they have an expectation of receiving money in the future. And in fact, it's also an asset. They've also collected a hefty fee, right? Oh yeah, we'll buy your risk, but we're going to need a hefty fee. See, this is how this works, folks. It's all smoke and mirrors and games, right? So, okay, back to the New York Times article. Tales of greed trumping. Oh, I see what you did there. Tales of greed trumping ethics and morals are older than Wall Street itself. And the story of how and why JP Morgan spent years serving Epstein is a case study in that dynamic. But it is instructive in other ways as well. More than 6 years after his death in a Manhattan jail cell, and please let's not loop into discussing that. It's not even important at this point, I would argue. And I'm not saying that it's not important overall. I'd say it's not important in the context of this article. Where he was awaiting prosecution on federal sex trafficking charges, mysteries continue to swirl around how Epstein amassed and deployed money and influence on a grand scale. Over time, those mysteries curdled into conspiracy theories, most of them unsubstantiated, that placed Epstein at the center of a vast global ring of a word for underage, or as a foreign intelligence operative or a domestic intelligence operative or both, compiling, and some of this I'm adding my own commentary, compiling dirt on the rich and powerful. The Trump administration's refusal to release files gathered by federal investigators as they built a case against Epstein, aside from unsuccessfully seeking to unseal an FBI agent's grand jury testimony. And typically, grand jury testimony is not unsealed, just so y'all know. That part of it's not necessarily unusual, has only added to the frenzied speculation. In Epstein's lengthy alliance with JP Morgan, we found a more mundane, if no less damning, explanation for Epstein's remarkable success. He was, in the words of one friend, the former Israeli Prime Minister, somebody Barak, a collector of people. Again, we're taught it's all about hard work and using one's own knowledge and skills and brain power, but it's actually networking because it says he was a collector of people. He used those relationships to cultivate new connections and establish his legitimacy. He traded favors and gossip and advice. He created an aura of indispensability and of being so plugged in that he bordered on omniscience, which is a word for God-like. Traits that made him a vital asset for a worldwide cast of government and business leaders. That in turn, or a quality of God, that in turn gave Epstein access to more money and connections that he could use to power his criminal activities. Or again, this system of things only speaks the languages of money and power that he could use to power his criminal activities. But in 2011, this edifice of power and influence was at risk of crumbling. His conviction and incarceration led some of his powerful friends to back away and threaten to leave him an outcast from the financial world. His relationship with JP Morgan was therefore more important than ever. He remained a client in good. The fact that he remained a client in good standing conferred on him respectability and helped him foster new ties to corporate elites. Because remember, when other people are worried, hey man, isn't that the sex offender? Oh yeah, he is, but how bad could he be? J.P. Morgan's doing business with him. See, he was absolved of some of his sins in the eyes of some. Some of the people who do wield power and influence, when they're asked by their network at the level of status quo and social contract and their own peer groups, when people are like, "Hey, man, what about this dude? I thought he went to federal prison for these sex crimes and sex trafficking." Oh yeah, well, J.P. Morgan's doing business with him, so how bad could he be? He's absolved on some level. See. Remember, why would anybody be ashamed of this? Where's the shame? Because he's been absolved, right? Absolution. He was determined not to. Oh, wait a minute. The fact that he remained a client in good standing conferred on him respectability and helped him foster new ties and new ties to corporate elites. He was determined not to blow it. Sitting in Cutler's office that autumn afternoon, Epstein assured the general counsel that he had, quote, turned over a new leaf. Oh, it's the honor system. We're taking his word for it, just like we took Saul of Tarsus's word for it about the transformative experience of Christ on the road to Damascus. Okay, it's the fucking honor system for sex traffickers. It's the honor system for Roman secular Jays who have apparently murked Christians, right? Or followers of the teachings of Christ, more correctly. And he rattled off names of prominent figures, and this is who rules over you, by the way. And he rattled off, and let me say this, the fact that Americans won't join me because I refuse to do any business with these big banks whatsoever since 08, 09. I will not do business with them, period. And what do you think these trucking companies think about me when I show up and my fucking bank account is a prepaid debit card, for fuck's sakes? It's like, who is this guy? He doesn't even have a bank account. He's no count. You're goddamn right. What I am can't ever have an account in this world. What I am can't ever have an account in this world because this world can't account for what I am. This world knows nothing of my qualities being one with the most super intelligent power of force and love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency. This world can only backwards engineer and construct my qualities based on the embodying the lack of those qualities. And this is what the American worker funds and supports with their efforts and tax dollars when they go off to work later today. Hi ho, hi ho, hi ho. And he rattled off names of prominent figures who, he told Cutler, could vouch for his character. Go talk to Bill Gates about me, Epstein said at one point. Afterward, Cutler sat alone because remember, he has morals. Jess Cutler, he's having a crisis of consciousness because, his pocketbook and, he's been personally persuaded by this, some version of a con man on some level who's very influential. But, he's worried. The human side of Cutler, Jess Cutler, is worried. This is lies and bullshit, this part. Afterward, Cutler sat alone, trying to figure out what to do. He kept brooding for weeks. Epstein struck him as a smooth operator. It wasn't hard to imagine him charming powerful people. Yeah, with sex, he charmed the pants off of he charmed the literal pants off of them. Yet Cutler didn't see how he would be able to explain to his female colleagues. Oh, because remember, the males don't have morals unless they're black, unless they're Morgan Freeman from playing God in a movie, right? It's the women who are going to be worried about it. Meanwhile, that's an inversion. What I see is that the women see a man is a man. Part of a man being a man is his own fucking morality, right? Part of it is his own code. See, a woman is a woman because she's got the parts. A man is a man is a status, and that has a lot to do with living up to his own code. A man could do all sorts of things to be viewed as less of a man. A woman's a woman because she's got the parts. So in inverted world, it's the woman who's going to go through. We're worried about what are the broads going to think about it. See. Meanwhile, the broads are worried because they're a little more sophisticated with the sewing circle dynamics of how does this reflect on me. See. It's the same reason, but lacking the actual morality. And this is not woman bashing. This is a difference and a distinction. It's the same reason why a woman who might not feel inclined to chat me up if I'm not wearing a wedding ring, because in my first marriage, I would at times wear a wedding ring. But if a group of her gal pals is in the like the hotel lobby and one of them is chatting me up, and she knows when she returns to the group of women, they're going to say, hey, we saw you talking to that guy, you must like him. She goes, oh no, he's married, didn't you see his wedding ring? See, this is just a more sophisticated version. It's not because of a morality, but yeah. Yet Cutler didn't see how he would be able to explain to his female colleagues that J.P. Morgan was keeping Epstein as a client, he would later say. After a second conversation with Epstein, which is really like, how am I going to explain this to my wife, is really what the guy's saying. After a second conversation with Epstein, and, God forbid his wife finds out about, Epstein literally, and this is irony, when Jeffrey Epstein charms the pants off of J.P. Morgan executives, that's the dictionary definition of irony. Shout out to the movie Reality Bites for teaching me that irony is when the literal meaning is the opposite of the actual meaning. Right. Epstein, he informed Staley. Wait a minute. After a second conversation with Epstein, he informed Staley that he still thought the bank should cut ties, right? And a lot of this is cover your ass plausible deniability. It's like, hey, man, I told him not to do business with that guy. But the recommendation came with crucial caveats. Cutler considered his primary job to be protecting J.P. Morgan from legal risks. So remember, the lawyers got to sign off on this. And that's just like the ratings agencies giving the steaming pile of garbage mortgage-backed securities AAA ratings. Somebody, and some of the risk being sold to AIG, somebody's got to sign off on this. We got to be absolved from potential culpability. See, Cutler considered his primary job to be protecting J.P. Morgan from legal risks. And from his perspective, the Epstein relationship was a threat to the bank's reputation. He did not see evidence that Epstein was using his accounts for criminal purposes. As a result, he would not insist that the bank expel him as a client, nor would he escalate the matter to Diamond, the chief executive. And see, we're already setting the stage for Jeff Epstein being able to say, well, I didn't know what was going on. I was out of the loop. Same thing happened with Enron. It's a whole bunch of the people at the top was like, yo, I just trusted, my trusted Jeff Skilling says, well, I saw Andrew Fastow's signature on the contracts. And so that was good enough for me. So, yeah. So Jeff Skilling testified before Congress. You can go watch it on YouTube, Jeffrey Skilling of Enron. And one of his answers was, well, I saw Andrew Fastow's signature. So that was good enough for me. And so Epstein was allowed to stay. The story of J.P. Morgan's relationship with Epstein begins in the late 1990s in the canyons of Manhattan's financial district. Epstein was in his late 40s, a college dropout who briefly worked, a college dropout who also taught college. Let's not forget that. Oh, a college dropout who taught at a college. Okay, how does that work? Epstein was in his 40s, a college dropout who briefly worked on Wall Street. Oh, and I'm sorry, high school math teacher. Well, close enough. In Manhattan, I believe, going from memory. Epstein was in his 40s, a college dropout at a private school, right? So people who sent their children in Manhattan to a prestigious private school, and pretty much everybody had college degrees, hired a college dropout to teach math to their kids. Is this the math doesn't math, folks? Who briefly worked on Wall Street before becoming a high school math teacher, and he had a gift for making it seem as if he belonged. Yeah, it's called neuro-linguistic programming, MK Ultra mind control, and all this other stuff. He had gone on to advise in being a CIA agent, and God knows what else. He had gone on to advise and manage money for some big-name clients. In 1985, he opened a bank account at a company that is now part of J.P. Morgan, but it wasn't until more than a decade later, as his wealth and renown grew, that he began getting noticed at the bank. Well, he was shaking his tail feather trying to get noticed, wasn't he? A J.P. Morgan client suggested to Sandy Warner, that's a famous name, the bank's chief executive at the time and a titan of American finance. Interesting. Sandy Warner's name enters the fray. Let's Google that because I know who that is, but I've already forgotten. So at least I remember that name from my study of the financial crisis. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, wait, is this an American model? What? Wait a minute. This can't be the same person. No, that's a different person. They don't have a Wikipedia page? Sandy Warner Banking. Oh, that's not the name. I don't think. Douglas A. Varner. See, it's not Sandy. Douglas Sandy Varner. Uh, Douglas Alexander Varner III, but widely known as Sandy, is an American banker who joined Morgan Guaranty Trust Company of New York out of college in 1968 as an officer's assistant and rose through the ranks to become chief executive officer and chairman of the board. Chairman of the board at J.P. Morgan. Heavy hitter, Jack. And that's even above the CEO, in a way. In 1995, among his many accomplishments, Varner may be best known for spearheading the 2000 sale of J.P. Morgan and Company to Chase Manhattan Bank. So this is the guy who oversaw the formation of J.P. Morgan Chase. Before that, it was merely J.P. Morgan. Interesting. It was a $30.9 billion deal. Okay, that's fascinating. And a titan of American finance that he meet this up and comer. Varner invited Epstein to a meeting in his 20th floor office. And I guess this is another charming the pants off of somebody, I guess. Varner invited Epstein to a meeting in his 20th floor office in the bank's neoclassical headquarters at 60 Wall Street. In parentheses, J.P. Morgan would move to Midtown a couple of years later. The pair, so moving on up to the east side, to a deluxe apartment in the sky. Yeah, moving on up. Well, we finally got a piece of pie. Yeah, that what was that lady's name? Dufresne or whatever. That lady who's now dead. Maybe it was her pie they're talking about. I don't know. Probably it depends on the proclivities of the individual executive. The pair talked about markets, and this is why I deserve to do this for a living, folks. Where else are you going to have somebody talk about these topics in such a way? The pair talked about markets and policy. Varner recalled in an interview, Epstein presented himself as a heavyweight, claiming to manage money for the Rockefellers. And lest we forget, there was a Rockefeller governor of Arkansas, Winthrop Rockefeller. I added that last part. That meeting, and in fact, I think the person responsible for the famous quote of competition is a sin, I believe that was a Rockefeller. That meeting was followed by a well-attended gathering at Epstein's Manhattan home. Varner today insists that he was immediately creeped out by Epstein. Even so, he phoned one of his lieutenants to encourage him to meet Epstein, who drops 50 names in an hour-long conversation. That lieutenant was Jess Staley. And again, professional liars. This guy had his pants charmed off, but he was creeped out. No, that's called the refractory period when the blood flows back out of the penis, sir. That was the creep factor. That's called your refractory period, sir. Staley had joined J.P. Morgan in 1979 after graduating from Bowdoin. I don't know how to pronounce this. Bowdoin. Bowdoin College in Maine I bet Mr. Miyagi knows how to pronounce that, with an economics degree. He worked for the bank in Brazil. He worked for the bank in Brazil, where he met his future wife, and then relocated to New York. His star rose rapidly inside the storied investment bank. In 1999, Varner promoted him. We're still talking about Jess Staley. In 1999, Varner promoted him to run J.P. Morgan's private banking division, which catered to ultra-wealthy clients. Not long after, at Varner's urging, Staley visited Epstein at his office in an old mansion across the street from St. Patrick's Cathedral in Midtown Manhattan. It was the beginning of a long, fateful friendship. In parentheses, Staley, as well as some other current and former senior bank executives, did not respond to our questions or declined to comment for this article. Epstein was on his way to becoming one of J.P. Morgan's most important clients. A 2003 internal report pegged his net worth at about $300 million. The report, which hasn't previously been disclosed, noted that Epstein's occupation, here comes Bed Bath and Beyond and Victoria's Secret enters the fray. Here comes Leslie H. Wexner. Surprise, surprise. The report, which hasn't previously been disclosed, noted that Epstein's occupation was advising wealthy individuals like Leslie H. Wexner, or Vexner, perhaps, spelled with a W. And then we see the phonetic vexing, because isn't a lot of this quite vexatious? Isn't a lot of this quite vexatious? Right? Let's define that term, vexatious. Woo! Boy, that dark chocolate's working its magic. Woo-wee! Vexatious. Not the Holy Bible, sir. The dictionary. Vexatious. Vexatious with a T. Causing vexation or annoyance, teasing, troublesome. Vexation. The action of vexing, annoying, or irritating someone or something. Okay, well, anyway. Enough about that. Back to the article. The billionaire operator of brands like Victoria's Secret and The Limited, though bank documents at the time did not, and it may not be Bed Bath & Beyond, although I think it is, though bank documents at the time did not list any other clients. That year, J.P. Morgan attributed more than $8 million in fees to Epstein, meaning, yes, the bank took $8 million in fees for conducting business with Epstein. Again, power and money, money and power. What have you done for me lately? Boop, 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 boop. Ooh, 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 yeah. Making him the biggest revenue generator among investor clients in the private banking division, also known as we got to make record earnings and record profits this quarter. Who can help us at the last minute make sure we hit our numbers? So what? So we get our bonuses. Sounds like Enron. They all operate this way. But the report overlooked something that, had it been taken seriously, might have dimmed the bank's enthusiasm. In 2003, Epstein withdrew more than $175,000 in cash from his J.P. Morgan accounts, a huge haul even for someone with millions at the bank. Outside investors later found that Epstein paid almost that exact amount to women that year. And remember, when they say women, we don't know what age they're referring to. And was that woman, what's her name? The lady that's in prison. Why can't I think of her name? But y'all know who I mean. That lady in prison. For some reason, her name escapes me. Epstein's partner in crime. Maybe the money went to her and then it went wherever it went after that. See, let's put a layer between us and them, right? And I don't mean us, anyway, y'all know what I did there. Again, this shows you how confusing the pronouns get within the English language. JP Morgan recognized that those withdrawals needed to be reported to federal regulators that monitor large cash transactions, but the bank failed to treat those withdrawals as an early warning system for itself. Now, see, let's read the article again. JP Morgan recognized that those withdrawals needed to be reported to federal regulators that monitor large cash transactions. It doesn't say that they were reported, but the bank failed to treat those withdrawals as an early warning system for itself. So it's implying that they tipped off the feds. Meanwhile, the regulators at the federal government understand that, hey, someday I'm going to retire from the federal government and somebody's going to hire me and quadruple my salary. So even if they reported it to the federal regulators, well, under the context of Benito Mussolini's helicopter hand, also known as the writings attributed to Benito Mussolini, fascist dictator of Italy during World War II, that would be known as the merger of the corporation and the government. So the bank and the government, you can't tell where one stops and the other begins, aka corporate fascism, as defined again by Benito Mussolini's helicopter hand. Indeed, JP Morgan's anti-money laundering specialists subsequently acknowledged that such withdrawals should have alerted the bank to the possibility that Epstein was committing crimes. And these last several paragraphs is starting to fall into the category of stupid or liar. Are these people who went to Ivy League schools and got all these high levels of education and then were able to get hired by banks like JP Morgan and others out of college? And in fact, recently, I believe that I played some audio from a channel that talked about the process whereby these, and if not, I will cover it at some point, because I listened to a channel where a guy who went and got a high level of education and then worked in investment banking for a prestigious, big three firm or whatever, right? He talked about here's what to do if you want to get hired by one of those firms. See, in order to even get these jobs out of college, there's certain metrics that must be met. So is it possible that somebody who went and did all of these things to even get these jobs in the first place, is it possible that they're actually incompetent, or are they fucking lying? You tell me. They should have alerted the bank to the possibility that Epstein was committing crimes. But remember, they had some of their bosses had the pants charmed off of them, literally, by Epstein. JP Morgan, however, was all in, or that's another word for pot committed, right? Soon it opened accounts, meaning that now their money is involved. And are they going to surrender the pot? Because to fold their holdings means somebody else scoops the pot, because all in is a term from poker. So at a certain point, the poker player might be pot committed, meaning they've already put enough of their resources. Now, what would be the pot commitment? Now, when they say they're all in, it's not the money, because none of this represents an amount of money that would represent anything whatsoever to JP Morgan's bottom line. When they say they were all in, what they mean is the executives were pot committed at the level of having skin in the game, because Jeffrey Epstein and his cohorts had charmed the pants off of these people and probably had the proof of such. See, JP Morgan, however, was all in. Soon it opened accounts not just for Epstein, but also for his companies, including one that handled the affairs of his private island, Lentil St. James, off the coast of St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands. The bank also provided financial backing for Epstein to help Jean-Luc Brunel, a French modeling scout who had been the subject of media reports about drugging and R-ing women, start a modeling agency called MC2. JP Morgan would ultimately open at least 134 accounts for Epstein, his companies, and his associates. Wittingly or not, the bank was, so whether they're lying or whether they were stupid or lying, that's what wittingly or not means. Whether they're stupid or liars, the bank was supporting important cogs in Epstein's sex trafficking machinery. On the island, Epstein would compel and I don't even want to get into the details of this, so I'm going to skip that part. So you can You just imagine what was going on the island. The millions of dollars in fees that Epstein was paying the bank was only part of his allure. Actually, I'm not going to imagine it. You can do whatever you want. I don't encourage anybody to imagine it. Arguably more important, he was identifying potential new clients and business opportunities. In 2003, for example, he introduced Staley to Brin, the co-founder of Google and one of the world's richest men. Brin hired JP Morgan to help manage his immense fortune. He would eventually park more than $4 billion in assets at the bank. So that was quad. Wait a minute. So 0.3. See, this is where billion and million becomes a problem. So let's do this. Let's do the math on this. So we have 300 million in Epstein's net worth. Now we have somebody parking 4 billion, which is 4,000 million. Right. So do the math on that. So Epstein has brought 200 million of his money and parked it at the bank. And now Epstein has brought in 4,000 million through somebody else in assets at the bank to park there, so-called. Right. Again, the system speaking only the languages of money and power. It doesn't know what you're talking about. And apparently sex also. I guess I've been leaving that out of but sex is power, as they say, right? Co-founder of Google and one of the world's richest men, so-called, although we know that's not the case. Brin hired JP Morgan to help manage his immense fortune. He would eventually park more than $4 billion in assets at the bank, a decision that Staley credited to Epstein. Staley later said in a deposition that a parade of other Epstein referrals, including to Gates, Elon Musk, which word scrambles to lone scum, and Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem, I don't know how to say this, Sulayem, Sulayem, an Emirati billionaire, followed, though not all became clients. And we're like 10% through this article, so I don't know if I should stop there or if anybody actually wants to hear the rest of this. Yeah, Ghislaine Maxwell, thank you. Or Ghislaine. Now I'll say this. If anybody wants to hit the pocketbook, since we're talking about money, if y'all are really into this, I'll happily read. I'll continue to read, even though my tinnitus is off the motherfucking charts right now. And I'll keep going, or we can save it for another stream. In my experience, it's better to get as much as possible, but I'm not tap dancing anymore for free today, or at least not with respect to this material. So I'll let y'all decide what you want to do. And what I'm going to do is maybe I'll hang out. I'm going to have to make the egg drink. So I'll hang out and make the egg drink while we figure out what we want to do. Either way, I'll shoot the chit. I'll shoot the chit with you for a bit while we have another egg drink. So, and then after that, if something slightly above a token gesture comes in, perhaps I'll continue reading. But it's a fucking long one. And, the fact is, I simply don't read as much as I used to. So it's also to my benefit to read this on stream. So probably I'll read more of it in the future. But when that will be, who knows? Can't say for sure. I should probably read the whole damn thing and then play it on a Bluetooth speaker in the streets of Los Angeles. It's really what I should do. But I mean, the fact is, nobody gives a flying fuck. I mean, can we face the reality that nobody really gives a fuck about any. I mean, yeah, in the so-called truth community, but does the public at large even give a fuck? I don't think they do, honestly. I think much of the public would trade places with these people in 5 seconds if they could. Right. That's the sad state of affairs. I think a lot of folks would trade places with them if they could. All right, bear with me while we attempt to multitask, which is certainly not Benton's one of Benton's strengths. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to the replay crew. And I think it's probably a low chance, but Just imagine if I ever managed to be reunited with my streamer setup, which I can only assume is probably gone forever. But if I manage to return to truck driving, and I don't know, however, whenever I can pass a drug test, um, we'll see about that. Maybe I'll just buy new shit. Maybe I'll manage to work long enough to fuck off to a $700 a month motel in Arkansas again. One never can tell. Although I don't know if I owe. Apparently, I owe T-Mobile money, and that's what I was using for unlimited internet in Fort Smith. Hmm. I really don't know if. Anyway, I'm sure that could be resolved, but hopefully. Although the motel at a certain point upgraded their internet, and if I stream in the early morning, who knows? I promise nothing here. It's just this is again a thought experiment. Is that appropriate? Is that an appropriate phrase to use? Well, I guess none of us owns the rights to the language, or I mean, I guess we do. Somebody does through branding and such, perhaps. Either way, top of the second egg time to you, Bubba. And see, the library is going to be opening soon. And at some point today, I have to go somewhere and charge my power bank, or tomorrow's streams will simply not be possible because I won't have a charge on the power bank. So you see, I am fucking doing shit here. There's a little more work goes into these streams than people may otherwise realize, right? And I'm definitely not going to sacrifice my own ability to walk around and listen to YouTube videos. So that's definitely a priority, above and beyond. Oh yes, my apologies. I gotta empty out the container for the egg whites. So bear with me, because I'm sure most people by now think that the healthy part of the egg is the white and the yolk is the part that only an insane person would ingest, but it's actually quite the opposite. Anyway, dump this out into this trash bag and hope it's not leaking. Yesterday it had little holes in it. But yeah, this one seems to. Yeah, this one seems to be all right. Okay, there we go. Checking the chat. Shout out to the chat. Appreciate y'all hanging out. Let's monitor the phone here, just in case some donos start rolling in, which they may. And I can talk about, there was an event involving both canine animals and human animals yesterday that happened fairly close to my car here in the park. And that was interesting. And I even assisted eventually at a certain point, arguably, as I'm happy to do. But because people don't like to follow the rules and the laws, a large, maybe a pit bull mix. I'm not an expert on dogs, but apparently bit another dog. And then, and I wasn't hit, I didn't see any of this. So this is what I was able to piece together. So this may not be wholly accurate, but the dog's owner was a large man who, definitely had the build of a person who has used or is using steroids, which it's fine. I believe in freedom. Do whatever you want, and no dog in that hunt. But the park staff had seized his animal, And then so he got into it and was being accused of physically assaulting one of the park workers. And then um, the dog's owner, the large angry, he was quite angry and kept acting like he was going to attack the park workers. And that causes a lot of alarm for people, such behavior in the park. And then you also have a situation where the police are called, but unlike the middle part of the country, especially places like Arkansas, the police don't get a call and roll on the call. What they do is the dispatchers and all of this, and see, all of this is under surveillance, both video and audio. So what they do is they get as much info as possible and monitor the audio and the video, and they're not showing up on the scene till motherfuckers chill out. Meanwhile, with males doing the whole body posturing around, maybe there's going to be fisticuffs, maybe there's not. Why would the cops roll in and put themselves in danger? And then also, if there's going to be a fist fight and they can watch it on TV, some version of TV, why wouldn't they? And then so I seem to be the only person who factored in that, hey man, the cop, and after a while, like it's been a while, like, it's been 30 minutes and, are the police going to show up? So when things seem to be calming down, but when they would finally seem to calm down, then it would get stirred back up. So I just calmly moseyed over and was like, and really I meant the big guy, but oh, what the fuck? I wasn't paying enough attention, and that yoke broke, man. God dang. I hate you. I don't lose a yoke very often, but well, shit. I'm worked up when I'm breaking the fucking yokes. Oh, this is bad, dude. You know how much practice I have with separating? This is a rare event indeed. Oh well, it happens. Such is life. And so I mosey over there, and it's interesting. It's like my presence just sort of chilled things out, and I sort of addressed everybody and was like, hey, that this is all under surveillance, so probably the police. I said, so I don't remember how I phrased it, but it was basically like, hey, if everybody chills out and calms down, then probably then the police will roll up. And of course, the big guy is trying to excitedly and angrily explain that he's calm. I am calm type shit. Although, not those words, but, and I'm just, I know not to take sides. I know not to in any way argue with people. It's just like, I'm just trying to remind them, like, hey, you please understand that this is all being surveilled. And yeah, the cops are probably going to come, but not till everybody chills the fuck out, or until y'all, I didn't say this part, but, or until y'all just go ahead and beat the shit out of each other and get it over with. And then they'll come after you're done. Right. Like that's how that works. And, they're certainly not going to show up and protect anybody other than the dog. If the dog starts getting attacked, then, they'll be here lickety split, but that's a whole nother matter. But of course I didn't say any of that, but, and then surprise, the cops rolled up within like 2 minutes of me walking over there. 2 to 3 minutes, Oh, an actual fucking, because one of the park workers is a problem. He's definitely got little man syndrome. I saw him yelling at somebody over at the bathrooms because sometimes these homeless people won't come out of the bathrooms and the staff need to clean the bathrooms. And he was like yelling at them, I'm going to call the cops and blah, blah, blah. And of course, the homeless person knows the fucking cops ain't showing. This ain't Santa Monica. The cops aren't going to show up and do a damn thing over somebody in a bathroom. Like it's extremely unlikely. And I think he's new to that job. And he's probably not thrilled to be cleaning a bathroom in the first place. I'm just assuming. But either way, a public bathroom that homeless people live in overnight, literally. But and that's what I deal with sometimes, trying to poop in the mornings. But I know if I get agitated, I can't poop. So it's like there's really no point. I can't get angry about it because if there's no bathroom for me, it's just like, okay, now if I hoop and holler enough that somebody exits the bathroom, now I can't poop anyway. So like, what's the difference? Right. And this is part of, homelessness is, it's great that I have this time to spend doing these things, but then you know, there's some built-in disadvantages clearly, such as where to go to the bathroom at times. Mark Basket. See, I'm going to blow your mind because Mark Basket said the egg whites is what holds the protein. Listen to this shit. This blew my mind because I had no idea. Per gram, there's more protein in the yolk on a per gram basis. But in aggregate, there's more protein in the white because it has more total weight in grams. But if you go per capita, there's more protein in the yolk. And so with me taking down 18 egg yolks a day, unless I break one of them, I think that it totals up to like 22 grams a day. Yeah, I think it's like 22 grams of protein a day. And what I've learned from eating 5,500 calories a day many years ago, every single day for years, and taking in way too much fucking protein, I've come to the conclusion that, especially for lifting weights and putting on muscles, that protein is super fucking overrated. Because how do inmates get so swole? Well, it turns out that even more important than protein to building muscle is carbohydrate. So in fact, somehow prisoners are able to get fucking swole while it's way easier for them to get their hands on carbs than it is protein. Right? Yeah, they can get, if they've got commissary, they can get tuna or whatever, but it's just way easier for them to get their hands on carbohydrates. Funny how that works, right? So if I had it to do over again, and I never did bodybuilding, but with putting on mass, um, it would be a much different thing. But I thought I knew what I was doing at the time. And of all the people I knew who were lifting weights and trying to get big, I did a pretty good fucking job compared to your average person putting on some mass. Um, and to all these guys that want to believe the hype around, well, women aren't into muscles. 100% of women, if you take a guy that they're already attracted to, if you could present her with two identical versions of a man that she already finds attractive, 100% of women will prefer the man who has more muscle mass, regardless of what they say. 100% of women will prefer the man who has more muscle mass. Right. Until you get to just absurd. Now, once you get to actual fucking bodybuilder levels, I'm sure that's going to change. But, if you got a man that's 165 pounds and a woman finds him attractive, she will be more attracted to the 195-pound version. I promise you. Don't believe their words. They don't know what the fuck they're talking about. They don't know that they're like that. Seriously. And then what happens is somebody asks them about muscles and they imagine a guy that they already don't find attractive because they just think about the last muscle head that they saw and they did not happen to find him attractive. See? And they're like, and they make a face and go, ooh, gross. No, no, no. If she's attracted to a 165-pound man, and then you could show her a 195-pound version, but I'm talking about muscle. If you show her the exact same dude that she already finds attractive, except plus 30 pounds of lean muscle, she will 100% of the time prefer the one with more muscle. Just how they are, bro. They don't know that that's how they are. It's how they are. I know from my own personal experience and my own observation. Because I actually met ex-wife number 2. I weighed $165 when I met her. But I was cut up and had muscles, and then I put another 30 pounds on, and my waist only went up my waist went up 2 inches. So I was 165 with about a 32-inch waist, and went to 195 with a 34-inch waist. And walking into hitting the weights before my shift at the Outback, and having the ladies react to me, my fellow female servers, or my female servers that I worked with. And,
I'm aware of these dynamics. Okay, it's a thing. It's a thing for sure, fellas. But yeah, if a woman is not attracted to a particular man, all the muscle in the world ain't going to do a damn bit of good. That's also part of it. And then the nuance gets lost in the discussion for whatever reason. All of that nuance goes by the wayside, um, as we know. It's just called life. All right, where are we at here? Losing track of what I'm doing. Oh yeah, we need the mushroom powder. We're going to need some of that in there. What is this? Reishi, chaga, and lion's mane. Yes, lion's. Unfortunately, this is not the expensive extract powder. This is just the regular old bullshit. Because I can't afford the good shit yet, or right now rather. Oh, Benton, he just ain't entitled to the. He ain't entitled to the good shit. You know, he ain't entitled to the good mushroom powder. You know, he's making do with the cheap shit. Because you know he hasn't proven himself worthy by pulling himself up by his external bootstraps, I guess. Right? Maybe one day he'll work a little harder and be able to have proper mushroom powders because he's got to earn it by making rich people richer, because that's the only way to prove the value of one's contribution to society. If the contribution doesn't make rich people richer, then it's not a proper sacrifice to a world of death and a game of lies. See, and the being, you know, was sacrificed to Moloch shortly after birth, lest we forget. So, you know, the failing to live up to that in the form of not at present making rich people richer. So, you know, that's some level of a moral failure in the eyes of this world, right? And it's amazing to see the mind control slaves who, not you, the listener, but just generally, that well, you know, Benton, how dare he not work a job? It's like, I don't know, how dare y'all pay taxes and support these corporate? And I, you know, I support the corporations too, but you know, how dare people give these corporations and banks free money, right? How much how much free money did J.P. Morgan get again? 25 billion, and that was just from TARP. You know, we're not even talking about what the Fed gave them. Just here, take it, right? And the person who's angry because their next door neighbor is on Section 8 and gets 1,200 a month in food stamps to literally feed children. You know, oh well, we're gonna need a prole to slave away to make rich scumbags richer. That's a necessity. But the rich scumbags, well, they can have effectively unlimited free money from the taxpayer, because the taxpayer, let's just face the reality, the taxpayer doesn't give a flying fuck what the government actually does with their tax money. I mean, can we face that reality that Americans don't give a shit what the government does? They just don't want to see certain things. And I don't think people really care about food stamps and Section 8. They just don't want to know about it. It's the fact that they see it happening and they're angry because they just went through a bunch of bullshit on their job. It's just like, and I started to make this point earlier and I failed to fully make it, but it was about when I had started having personal problems and quit my job. But my ex-wife number two, my wife at the time, was still working. So pretty quickly I understood that I needed to be standing at the sink when she came through the door with a wash rag and a dirty dish in my hand, or a dish that I had just rinsed. And I would comically, as she came through the door, I would be looking at her with the dish held up and just be like kind of comically scrubbing the dish, right? Sort of letting her know, like, hey, I understand that you're pissed off when you come in stressed out from work and I'm sitting on the couch. So here I am performatively showing you that I actually, because the fact that the apartment is spotlessly clean, well, that doesn't mean anything. It's the fact that she sees me goofing off. I've been working, he's lounging, right? So I would just be lounging and, oh, look at the clock. She's going to be home within the next 5 minutes. Better go walk over to the sink and performatively be in position to performatively, in a comic fashion, give her what she needs, right? And see, the thing about being a woman is, and don't know anything about it, but from her perspective, I logically explained all this to her, and on some level, she knows it doesn't make a difference. It's the emotional reaction. Right. It's now she's going to be in a funk all the rest of the day simply because I was sitting on the couch when she walked through the door. Right. Meanwhile, the only reason I was free to sit on the couch going through some version of an existential crisis and personal problems was because I had us on such a strict budget that we were still able to pay for everything. And she still left in the morning with her pack of cigarettes and her $10 allowance for the day. And I said it allowance because whatever money she left the house with that's how much she spent. If she left with $10 and a pack of smokes, she fucking spent $10. If she left with no pack of smokes and $100, she spent $100. If she left with a pack of cigarettes and a $20 bill, she spent $20. Didn't fucking matter. So it was like, here's your cigarettes, here's your $10. Tomorrow you get another $10 bill and another pack of cigarettes. And had to coach her through people bumming her cigarettes because pretty soon I see her in the fridge because we kept them in the fridge because I bought them a carton at a time to get the best possible deal. And I see her out there. I'm like, what are you doing in there? She's going for the cigarettes. I said, listen, you can't. So then I'm like, what the fuck's going on? Oh, people have been bumming the cigarettes. And so I taught her how to tell people no because I said, listen, you don't understand this, but there's people who smoke cigarettes all day and never buy a pack of cigarettes. They just, every time they see a smoker, they ask for a cigarette. So say, here's what you can do. Give away all the cigarettes you want, but once yours are gone, you're going to have to start asking people for cigarettes. So I don't care what you do, but we're not buying more than one pack of cigarettes in a 24-hour period. I don't know what to tell you. So you make up your mind, lady. And so I taught her how to say no to people because she just feels bad, She would feel bad. I said, they've got the money. They're addicted to cigarettes. They're using you to pay for their cigarettes. How is that okay? Right? In what world is that okay? And now I can't find my cup. Where the fuck is it? I've somehow misplaced the cup it's funny living in the car and just losing everything on a consistent basis. Where the fuck is it? I mean, there's really not too many places it could be. All right, this is fucking strange. Hang on. I'm a flashlight. Where's my flashlight? This is crazy. The fuck? It's like living in a big rig. It's to just lose everything multiple times a day. Everything is lost at some point, multiple times a day. The hell? This don't make a damn bit of sense. Oh, it's got to be underneath this thing. Maybe not. Oh, there it is. Yeah, everything in here is black. So yeah, couldn't see it. All right. All right. And I even taught her my trick of saying no, which is as soon as somebody starts to ask you for something that you're going to say no to, just immediately start subtly shaking your head side to side. It's a very powerful psychological symbol. Like as soon as they start asking, just very subtly start shaking the head back and forth. Definitely can't tell them that your old man's got you on a strict fucking budget. And smoking is expensive, even back then, lest we forget. And she appreciated it. And again, at a certain point, I became aware that I was spending like 25% of my fucking mental faculties and resources on a daily basis, like managing this broad's affairs, because she didn't want to become a full adult on some level. But whatever. And that was somewhere in there when I was considering becoming a white pimp, especially since she was at times would just show up with some random attractive broad, and it's like, I really didn't ask you to just show up here with hot chicks. Like, what are you doing? It's like I didn't say it, but I was thinking it. What is this? Are you trying to? Am I going to have more clients under management? Like, what is this? You know. I'm going to have to start going to strip clubs and start managing these broads. Like, what is this? I'm not trying to. I'm not trying to Gary Oldman this motherfucker. Gary Oldman from True Romance. I don't. I just never could see myself with the gold tooth and dreadlocks or whatever, braided hair. Eating Chinese food with a black bodyguard, fucking making wisecracks. Store-bought eggs are real eggs, sir. This idea that you got to get them fresh from the farm, that's a fucking lie, man. It really is. And I hate to say it that way, but all eggs come from the farm. Where do you think these eggs come from? Like, for real. Because when I'm in Fort Smith, Arkansas, I know where to go get the type of eggs you're talking about. They're not that much different than the regular. They're just really not that much different than what's in the stores, man. They're not. That's a bit of a myth, I have to say. It's again to sort of romanticize, and it's funny because that's also a very like hippy dippy thing. Because if y'all have ever seen that TV show Portlandia, they lampoon the concept of people wanting to know like where their food's coming from, and then at a certain point they're eating at a restaurant and they're asking the waiter all these questions, and they want to know like all about the chickens and these things, and that they just like take a trip to the farm, like it's like they want to know the entire like life history of the chicken or whatever. Like it kind of turns into a version of that. Like, no, man. What I've learned from all of this consuming of eggs is they're way more alike than they are different. We at a certain point we just decided if you go straight to the source that's somehow better. Well, around freshness, sure. Beyond that, no. I mean, it's just simply not a thing. I hate to break it to you. And I'm from Arkansas, lest we forget, which is like, pretty fucking big in chickens and eggs. I don't know if y'all know that. So this idea that because it's a human being that owns a piece of property, that somehow leads to a better product. Well, it does, but not when it comes to chicken eggs. It's just not, right? It's simply not. And everybody can have their own opinion, but it is what it is, man. And like half of my daily calories for like well over a year now is egg yolks. I feel uniquely suited to speak on this. How many calories is that's 18 egg yolks? That's like 900. No, it's about 50 calories per egg yolk. Yes, 900 calories a day. That's fairly close to half of my daily calories for well over a year. What I found is go to the grocery store, get the regular old white eggs, and on average, that's about as good as you're going to do. For the way I consume them. Now, if you're cooking and you're doing, if you're going for taste and all of these things, see, my only involvement is nutrition. I'm not that concerned with the taste. I'm not cooking them. I'm putting them in hot drinks. And I'm here to tell you, man, it's just not an advantage to get them in the way you're talking about. It's just not. I wish it was, but it ain't. Now, the benefit I've found is the ones that get fed the flax seed. And remember, we're in California, so by law, these chickens, they can't be caged. I don't know if y'all know that. See, everybody thinks California is ridiculous. Now, I will say there's a difference. There could be a difference if you're if you're anywhere but California in some of these states, because they can put them in tiny little cages for their whole life, right? You can't do that in California. And in fact, that was part of the reason why there were egg shortages here, is because they couldn't just buy eggs from whoever in middle America would sell them eggs. They have to be certified for California. So somebody, again, just like we're talking about with these articles, somebody has to sign off on those eggs were produced at a facility that lets them roam to some extent, right? And I don't know that people are aware of that. And in fact, that's the major reason I pay more for eggs here across the board, is because they have to be, I think they call it CACEFS certified or something like that. Whereas, your stores in Arkansas and all these other states will just sell you whatever, right? Which is where it used to be, 99 cents, 88 cents at Walmart in Arkansas for 6 eggs or whatever it was, So let's not forget that part either. But yeah, my thing is I want as many omega-3s as possible. So, um, I'm trying to get those ones where they feed them the flaxseed to jack up the omega-3s. Other than that, they're all about the same. It is what it is. Don't kill the messenger. Because I was spending money for fancy eggs, and I'm here to tell you, man. Where do you think they get Where do you think they produce the fancy eggs? It's the same egg that y'all are saying is this highfalutin egg. It's the same egg. The fancy egg, it's the same egg, except you can't get it as fresh necessarily. Necessarily. Meanwhile, these people who are selling to the public, basically, unless it's your chickens, you don't fucking know. Unless it's your chickens. If you're driving to somebody's farm, I don't know how many eggs they're producing. I don't know how old these things are, right? Like, until people can do all that math, like, what are we even talking about? I mean, that's the way I look at it, but call me crazy. Call me crazy. And we've definitely, as a people or as a culture, we've become way too, and myself included, we've become way too suspicious of things. Because especially when after I almost died and I was trying to figure out what could I eat, to deal with my pancreatitis and all of this. And food itself made me sick. And I couldn't bring up canned tuna without everybody freaking the fuck out about mercury. And I'm like, guys, I almost fucking died. Like, at this point, the mercury is the fucking least of my, who cares? Like, I'm trying to put food in my body and I don't even have an appetite. Right. It's like, I'm able to eat the tuna. Leave me the fuck alone. And now I'm on the sardines. See, I'm supposed to be at Whole Foods right now, picking up my sardines. So we'll see if the stream continues or not. At this point, I'm pretty sure it's going to be ending fairly soon, but I don't know. I got time. We'll see. Still got a few minutes. But I forgot I need to go to. That's the thing about Whole Foods, man. I hate going in there later in the day. It just sucks. I like to get there as the Amazon counter opens at 9. I try to get there as close to 9 as possible, And Jeff Bezos, in his infinite wisdom, will no longer send grocery items to just any old Amazon locker. He wants you to have to go to a Whole Foods, so you might buy other shit while you're there. I don't know, it's not Bezos, but you know what I mean. Oh, I got a whole Amazon story too. I haven't even told yet. All right, let's see. Yeah, I think we're done. I think we're done here. All right. Thanks for watching. Bye.